In a crowded cafe where laughter filled every corner, two deaf children sat in silence, invisible, ignored, desperately signing for help that never came. Everyone looked away, everyone except one man, a broken single father with nothing left but $20 and a secret only the silence could understand. What happened next would change four lives forever and prove that sometimes the quietest moments speak the loudest. Stay with me until the very end of this story and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this journey travels. The fluorescent lights of Rosewood Cafe buzzed with an almost mechanical indifference, casting their cold glow over the Friday evening crowd. It was the kind of place where exhaustion came to sit down, where the working class gathered after long shifts to nurse cheap coffee and pretend for just a moment that the weight on their shoulders didn't exist. Jacob Miles pushed through the glass door at exactly 7:47 p.m., his construction boots still caked with dried cement, his flannel shirt carrying the dust of a 12-hour day. He was 34 years old, but tonight he felt like 60. Every muscle in his body screamed for rest. Every bone ached with the kind of tiredness that sleep alone couldn't cure. The cafe was packed, bodies everywhere, families crowded around small tables, teenagers laughing too loud in the corner, businessmen typing furiously on laptops while their cold coffees sat forgotten. The noise was overwhelming, a symphony of chaos that seemed to pulse against the walls. Jacob didn't mind. Noise meant life. Noise meant the world was still spinning, even when his own had stopped 3 years ago. He made his way to the counter, fishing his wallet from his back pocket. Inside, a single $20 bill sat folded and worn, the last of his paycheck after rent, after utilities, after the child support payments for a daughter he only got to see twice a month. Money was tight. Money was always tight. But a man needed coffee to survive, and Jacob Miles had learned long ago that survival was the only game worth playing. "What can I get you?" The barista was young, probably 19, with tired eyes that suggested she understood exhaustion in her own way. "Just a black coffee," Jacob said. "Large." $3.50. He handed over a 5, waited for his change, and turned to find a seat. That's when his eyes swept across the room, past the laughing teenagers, past the typing businessmen, past the families sharing plates of overpriced sandwiches, and landed on the corner. Two children sat at a small table near the window, their bodies pressed close together as if they were trying to disappear into each other. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old, twins, clearly, with matching dark curls and wide brown eyes that held something Jacob recognized immediately. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. The little girl's hands were moving rapidly, fingers dancing in patterns that most people in the cafe probably dismissed as fidgeting. But Jacob knew better. He knew those patterns. He knew that language. She was signing, help, scared. Want to go home. The little boy beside her signed back, his movements smaller, more hesitant. Sister, it's okay. Emily coming back. Jacob's chest tightened. He stood frozen in the middle of the cafe, coffee forgotten in his hand, watching two deaf children communicate in a room full of people who couldn't hear them and didn't care to try. No one was looking at them, not a single person. A woman at the next table glanced over once, frowned at the children's moving hands, and deliberately turned her chair away. A man walking past muttered something under his breath. Jacob caught the word weird and kept moving. The barista behind the counter looked at the twins with an expression that bordered on annoyance, as if their very presence was an inconvenience. Jacob felt something shift inside him. Something old. Something buried. He thought of Sarah, his wife, his beautiful, brilliant wife who had lived her entire life in silence, who had taught him that communication wasn't about sound, it was about connection. Sarah, who had died 3 years ago in a car accident that had stolen Jacob's voice in ways no one could see. Sarah, who had shown him that the quietest people often had the most to say. The little girl's hands moved again, more frantic now. "Where is Emily? Why isn't she back? I'm scared, Noah. I'm really scared." The boy, Noah, reached over and grabbed his sister's hand, squeezing tight. "Don't be scared, Nora. I'm here. I won't leave you." Jacob's feet moved before his brain could stop them. He crossed the cafe in what felt like slow motion, weaving between tables and chairs, his eyes never leaving those two small figures huddled together against a world that had chosen to ignore them. He stopped at their table. The twins looked up, and Jacob saw it, the instant recognition of an adult approaching, the tensing of small bodies preparing for rejection, for judgment, for another person telling them they didn't belong. Slowly, carefully, Jacob raised his hands, and he signed. "Hello, my name is Jacob. Are you okay?" The effect was immediate and profound. Nora's eyes went wide, her mouth falling open in shock. Noah's entire body seemed to release tension he'd been holding for hours. They looked at each other, then back at Jacob, as if they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. You can sign?" Nora's hands trembled as she formed the words. Jacob smiled gently and nodded. "Yes. I learned a long time ago. Are you two here alone?" Noah shook his head quickly. "Our sister Emily. She went to talk to the man behind the counter. She's been gone a long time." Jacob glanced toward the counter and saw her for the first time, a young woman, maybe 22 or 23, standing rigidly in front of the manager's station. Her shoulders were hunched, her head bowed, and even from across the room, Jacob could see she was fighting back tears. "Sir, I've already explained this." The manager's voice cut through the cafe noise, sharp and dismissive. He was a heavy-set man in his 40s, balding, with the kind of face that suggested he'd never been inconvenienced a day in his life, and resented anyone who dared to change that. "Your siblings are disturbing my customers. The hand movements, the sounds they make. They're not making sounds." The young woman's voice cracked. "They're communicating. They're deaf. This is how they talk." "Well, they can talk somewhere else." The manager crossed his arms. "This is a family establishment. We have standards." "They are family!" The woman's composure shattered. "They're my family. My little brother and sister who haven't eaten since breakfast because I've been working a double shift and the daycare canceled last minute, and I had no choice but to bring them here, and they've been so good. They've been so patient, and all I wanted was to buy them some dinner and, ma'am, lower your voice. I am lowering my voice. You're the one who... I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The cafe had grown quieter now. Heads were turning. People were watching the spectacle unfold with the kind of morbid curiosity that humans reserved for other people's pain, fascinated, but unwilling to help. Jacob set his coffee down on the twins' table. "Stay here," he signed to Noah and Nora. "I'll be right back." He walked toward the counter, and something in his stride must have communicated authority because the manager's eyes shifted to him immediately, wary and defensive. "Can I help you?" The manager's tone suggested he very much did not want to help anyone. "Yeah." Jacob's voice was calm, steady. "You can start by apologizing to this woman." The manager blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Jacob positioned himself beside the young woman. Emily, the twins had called her. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly, the coffee stain on her waitress uniform that suggested she'd come straight from work without time to change. "Those children in the corner aren't disturbing anyone. They're communicating in the only way they can. That's not a disruption, that's a conversation." "Sir, this is none of your business." "I'm making it my business." The manager's face reddened. "Are you with them?" "I am now." Emily turned to look at Jacob, confusion and desperation warring in her expression. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Someone who understands." Jacob met her eyes. "Those are your siblings, Noah and Nora?" She nodded slowly, thrown off by the fact that a complete stranger knew her twins' names. "They're scared," Jacob continued. "They've been sitting over there signing about how scared they are, asking where you went, wondering why everyone keeps looking at them like they've done something wrong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Do you know how I know that?" Emily shook her head. Jacob raised his hands and signed smoothly. "Because I speak their language." For a moment, Emily just stared. Then her face crumpled, and she pressed a hand to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God." "Hey," Jacob's voice gentled. "It's okay. Breathe." "You don't understand." Emily's words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. They never, Everywhere we go, people just stare, or they get annoyed, or they act like my brother and sister are broken somehow, like they're less than. And I try so hard to explain, but no one listens, no one cares, and I'm so tired. I know. You don't know. Emily's voice rose again, raw with exhaustion. You can't possibly know what it's like to watch two beautiful, brilliant children be treated like they're invisible. Like they don't matter, like they don't deserve the same basic human decency as everyone else in this room. I do know. Something in Jacob's tone made Emily stop. He took a breath. My wife was deaf, he said quietly. For 12 years I watched the world look right through her. Watched people assume she was stupid because she couldn't hear. Watched waiters talk to me instead of her because they didn't want to bother trying. Watched her cry in the car after family dinners where nobody included her in the conversation. Jacob's jaw tightened. So yes, I know exactly what it's like. Emily's tears fell faster now, but something had shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe. Connection. Was? She asked softly. She passed away 3 years ago. I'm so sorry. Jacob shrugged, but the gesture held none of its usual casualness. The world's a hard place for people who communicate differently. Doesn't have to be, but it is. He turned back to the manager, who had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort. Now, about that apology. The manager's face twisted. I don't have to apologize for maintaining the standards of my establishment. Your standards? Jacob's voice dropped, taking on an edge that made several nearby customers shift in their seats. Your standards are discriminating against disabled children. Your standards are making a young woman cry because her siblings don't communicate the way you think they should. Your standards are everything that's wrong with this world. He stepped closer to the counter. Let me be real clear. Those kids are going to sit at that table, and they're going to eat dinner, and they're going to sign to each other as much as they want. And you're going to leave them alone. You're going to leave all of us alone. Or I promise you, by tomorrow morning, every disability rights organization in the state is going to know the name of this cafe and exactly how you treat deaf children. The manager's face had gone from red to pale. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm making you a promise. Jacob held the man's gaze without flinching. Your choice. The silence stretched. The entire cafe seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the manager looked away. Fine, he muttered. Just keep them quiet. Jacob almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he just shook his head and turned to Emily. Come on, let's get those kids fed. They walked back to the corner table together, and the moment Noah and Nora saw their sister, they practically launched themselves off their chairs. Emily dropped to her knees and gathered both twins in her arms, holding them so tight it looked like she was trying to absorb their fear through sheer force of will. It's okay, she signed over their shoulders. I'm here. I'm sorry I was gone so long. I'm here now. Jacob stood back, giving them space, but Nora's eyes found his over Emily's shoulder. The little girl's hands moved hesitantly. The nice man helped. The nice man who talks like us. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes, and looked up at Jacob. I don't even know your name? Jacob? Jacob Miles? Emily Hart. She stood, keeping one hand on each twin's shoulder, as if she was afraid to let go. I don't know how to thank you. What you did back there, no one's ever... She stopped, shook her head. No one's ever stood up for us like that. Shouldn't have to be special, Jacob said. Should just be normal. But it's not. Not for us. Emily's voice was heavy with exhaustion that went far deeper than one difficult evening. This is our life. Every day. Every restaurant, every store, every doctor's office. People staring, people whispering, people deciding my siblings are problems to be dealt with instead of children to be loved. Jacob nodded slowly. I know. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He glanced down at Noah and Nora, who were watching him with something that looked dangerously close to hope. Look, I don't want to overstep, but those kids need to eat, and you look like you haven't sat down in about 12 hours. Let me buy dinner, please. Emily's pride flared immediately. I can't let you do that. You can, actually. We don't take charity. It's not charity. Jacob pulled the 20 from his wallet. the last money he had until his next paycheck. It's one tired person helping another, that's all. Emily looked at the bill, then at Jacob's face, then at her siblings, who were now signing rapidly to each other. The nice man is going to get us food. Real food? Hot food? I think so. Nora, I'm so hungry. Me too, Noah. Me too. Emily's resistance crumbled. Okay, she whispered. Okay, thank you. They ordered. Nothing fancy. Chicken sandwiches for the twins, a cup of soup for Emily, coffee refills for both adults. The food came quickly, probably because the manager wanted them gone as soon as possible, and Jacob watched as Noah and Nora fell upon their dinners like they hadn't seen a meal in days. Slow down, Emily signed to them. You'll make yourselves sick. But it's so good, Nora signed back, her cheeks stuffed like a chipmunk's. The bread is warm. Jacob found himself smiling despite everything. The twins' joy was contagious, a small, bright spot in the exhausting gray of his day. How old are they? He asked. 6. They'll be 7 in March. Emily stirred her soup without eating it, too tired or too worried to have much appetite. I've been raising them since they were 4. Our mom passed and our dad... She trailed off, her expression hardening. Our dad decided he wasn't interested in raising deaf children. Jacob's hand tightened around his coffee cup. He left? The day after the funeral. Emily's voice was matter-of-fact, but the pain beneath it was unmistakable. Packed a bag, emptied the bank account, and disappeared. Left me with 2 traumatized toddlers who couldn't hear me explain where mommy went, who couldn't hear me promise everything would be okay, who could only watch my face and try to understand why their whole world had fallen apart. Emily. I was 19. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 19 years old, working part-time at a grocery store, no college degree, no savings, no plan. Just 2 little kids who needed me to be everything. Mother, father, sister, advocate, interpreter, everything. Jacob let the silence sit between them, understanding that sometimes people needed space more than words. The first year was the hardest, Emily continued. I had to learn sign language from scratch. Our mom had taught me some basics, but the twins needed fluent communication, not just basic phrases. So I spent every spare minute studying, YouTube videos, library books, online courses, practiced in the mirror until my hands cramped, made mistakes constantly, signed things wrong, frustrated them and myself. She shook her head. But I got better. We figured it out together. Emily is the best signer, Noah signed, having noticed their conversation. She talks to us better than anyone. Emily's face softened as she signed back. I try, buddy. You and your sister help me get better every day. The nice man is good too, Nora added. His hands moved pretty. Jacob felt his throat tighten at the innocent compliment. Tell her thank you for me. Emily relayed the message and Nora beamed. For the next half hour, they sat together at that corner table, 2 strangers and 2 children, and something shifted in the air around them. The tension that had gripped Emily's shoulders began to ease. The fear in the twins' eyes faded, replaced by curiosity and cautious comfort. Even the cafe itself seemed less hostile, though Jacob noticed several patrons still shooting disapproving glances their way. He didn't care. Let them look. Can I ask you something? Emily said eventually, her soup bowl empty now. Sure. Your wife, the one who was deaf. She hesitated. You said she passed 3 years ago. How have I coped? Emily nodded. Jacob stared at his coffee, watching the steam curl upward and dissipate into nothing. I haven't, he admitted. Not really. I go to work, I come home, I eat, I sleep, I repeat. I see my daughter when I can, call her every night before bed. I exist. He paused. But living? Actually living? That stopped when Sarah did. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. No, it's okay. It's just... Jacob struggled to find the words. Sarah was everything to me. She was the first person who ever really saw me, you know? Not my background, not my struggles, not all the ways I didn't measure up. Just me. And she loved me anyway. Loved me because of who I was, not in spite of it. His voice roughened. When she died, I lost my voice. which is ironic considering she never had one to begin with, but that's what it felt like. Like the only person who understood my language was gone, and I was left here trying to communicate in a world that suddenly made no sense. Emily reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. She sounds wonderful. She was. Jacob cleared his throat. She was fierce and funny and kind. She fought for accessibility everywhere she went, restaurants, hospitals, workplaces. She didn't let anyone make her feel less than. She used to say that being deaf wasn't a disability, it was just a different ability. That the world was the one with the problem, not her. She was right. Yeah. Jacob looked at the twins who had finished their sandwiches and were now drawing pictures on napkins with borrowed pens. She would have loved Noah and Nora. Would have been all over that manager, probably made him cry. He smiled faintly at the thought. She didn't take crap from anyone. I wish I was more like that, Emily admitted, but most days I'm just trying to survive, just trying to get through without falling apart. That's its own kind of strength. It doesn't feel like it. Never does. Trust me. The cafe was starting to empty now, the evening crowd giving way to quieter hours. Jacob glanced at the clock on the wall, 9:15 p.m. He had to be up at 5 for another shift, another 12 hours of back-breaking labor that would leave him too exhausted to think about the emptiness waiting for him at home. But something kept him in his seat, something in the way Nora had signed that his hands moved pretty, something in the way Noah watched him with quiet trust, as if he'd decided Jacob was safe. Something in the way Emily looked at him like he was the first person in years who had actually listened. Listen, Jacob said, the words forming before he could stop them. I know we just met, and I know this is probably going to sound crazy, but those kids, he gestured at Noah and Nora, they deserve someone who can help them navigate this world, someone who speaks their language, who can advocate for them, who knows what it's like to be on the outside looking in. He swallowed hard. If you ever need anything, translating at doctor's appointments, dealing with school administrators, just someone to sit with them while you catch your breath, I want to help. Emily stared at him. You don't even know us. I know enough. Jacob, that's... She shook her head, overwhelmed. That's the kindest offer anyone's ever made me. But I can't ask you to do that. You have your own life, your own problems. My problems will still be there whether I help you or not. Jacob met her eyes. But maybe helping you helps me too. Maybe being useful again gives me a reason to care about something beyond just getting through the day. He pulled a receipt from his pocket and scribbled his phone number on the back. No pressure, no expectations. But if you need me, I'm here. Emily took the paper, her hands trembling slightly. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for strangers? Jacob thought about the question, thought about Sarah, about the way she used to light up when someone, anyone, took the time to communicate with her in her language, thought about all the times he'd watched people look right through her, and the way it had made him want to scream at a world that couldn't be bothered to see the extraordinary woman standing right in front of them. Because someone should have done it for my wife, he said finally, and no one did. Not enough people, anyway. So maybe I can be that person now. Maybe I can be what I wish the world had been for her. The silence that followed was heavy with things unspoken, grief and gratitude and the strange, fragile possibility of connection. Then Noah looked up from his napkin drawing and signed, Emily? Is the nice man our friend now? Emily looked at Jacob, a question in her eyes. Jacob raised his hands and signed directly to Noah. If you want me to be. Noah's face split into a grin so wide it seemed to light up the entire cafe. He grabbed his sister's arm. Nora, the nice man says he's our friend. Nora looked at Jacob with something approaching wonder. Really? A real friend? Jacob nodded. A real friend. What happened next nearly broke him. Nora slid off her chair, walked around the table, and wrapped her small arms around Jacob's legs in a hug. A moment later, Noah joined her, pressing his face against Jacob's side with the unselfconscious trust that only children could manage. Jacob looked down at two small heads of dark curls, felt two pairs of thin arms holding on to him like he was something precious, and realized his eyes were burning. He'd forgotten what this felt like, being needed, being wanted, being seen by someone who didn't care about his failures or his grief or the empty apartment waiting for him, who just saw a man with kind hands who spoke their language and decided that was enough. "You're crying," Nora signed when she pulled back, concern on her small face. "Did we hurt you?" Jacob shook his head quickly, wiping his eyes. "No, sweetheart. These are happy tears." "Happy tears?" Noah looked confused. "Tears can be happy?" "Sometimes when something makes your heart feel very full, the feelings spill out through your eyes." Jacob touched his chest. "Your hug made my heart very full." The twins exchanged glances, then both broke into giggles, a sound that, even without hearing it, Jacob knew was beautiful. Emily was crying too now, not even trying to hide it. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "I don't know how to thank you for—" "Don't thank me yet," Jacob said gently. "Thank me when those kids graduate high school. Thank me when they go to college. Thank me when they grow up knowing they deserve every opportunity this world has to offer." He paused, a small smile crossing his face. "That's when you can thank me. Not now. Now we're just getting started." Emily laughed, a real laugh this time, filled with something that sounded almost like hope. "Okay," she said. "Okay, getting started. I can do that." Outside the cafe windows, the night had grown dark. Streetlights flickered to life along the sidewalk, casting pools of orange glow against the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked. Somewhere else, a dog barked at shadows. Inside, at a corner table that had witnessed so much pain and rejection just hours ago, 4 people sat together: an exhausted single dad, an overwhelmed young woman, and 2 deaf twins who had spent most of their short lives feeling invisible. They weren't invisible anymore. Jacob stayed with them until the cafe closed, helping Emily gather up the twins' napkin drawings, making sure Noah had his jacket zipped all the way up, signing silly jokes to Nora just to see her face scrunch up with laughter. At the door, Emily paused. "Jacob?" "Yeah?" "I'm going to take you up on your offer, not because I can't do this alone. I've been doing it alone for 3 years. But because—" she struggled. "Because those kids deserve more than just surviving. They deserve someone in their corner who understands them. And maybe, just maybe, you're that person." Jacob nodded. "I'll try to be." "One more thing." Emily hesitated. "I don't know what you believe in. God, fate, the universe, whatever. But I think my mom sent you to us tonight. I really do. Because the odds of you walking into that cafe, knowing sign language, caring enough to help—" She shook her head. "That's not coincidence. That's something else." Jacob thought about that. Thought about the way his feet had moved before his brain could stop them. Thought about the strange, insistent pull toward that corner table. "Maybe," he said quietly, "or maybe sometimes broken people just find each other." Emily smiled, a real, full smile that transformed her tired face into something almost luminous. "Maybe that's the same thing." She took the twins' hands and walked out into the night, pausing at the edge of the parking lot to wave. Noah and Nora waved too, their small hands moving enthusiastically. "Bye, friend Jacob," Nora signed. "See you soon," Noah added. Jacob raised his hand and signed back, "See you soon." He stood in the doorway of the cafe until they were out of sight, until Emily's old Honda disappeared around a corner and the parking lot was empty and the night pressed in around him with all its familiar silence. Then he walked to his truck, climbed inside, and sat there for a long moment without starting the engine. His hands were shaking. He looked at them, rough, calloused hands that had spent the day lifting cinder blocks and mixing cement, hands that used to hold Sarah's face when he kissed her, hands that had learned a whole new language just to tell her she was loved, hands that tonight had reached out to 2 frightened children and offered them something the world had been refusing them their whole lives: respect, understanding, connection. Jacob started the engine. The drive home took 20 minutes, through streets he knew by heart, past buildings he'd stopped really seeing years ago. His apartment complex loomed at the end of the route, a tired collection of beige boxes stacked 3 stories high, filled with people all trying to get through their days without falling apart. He parked, climbed the stairs, unlocked his door. The apartment was exactly as he'd left it, sparse, functional, empty. A couch he'd bought secondhand, a television he rarely turned on, A kitchen table where he ate alone every night, staring at the chair across from him where Sarah used to sit. Tonight, though, something felt different. Jacob moved through the space without turning on lights, letting the glow from the street lamps outside guide his way. He stopped at the small table by the window, the one that held a framed photograph of Sarah and him on their wedding day. She was laughing in the picture. He remembered that moment exactly, how she'd signed something funny right before the photographer clicked the shutter, how he'd burst out laughing in response, how the photographer had complained that they'd ruined the shot, but Jacob had insisted on keeping it anyway, because that was Sarah. That was them. Laughing in the middle of serious moments, finding joy in the spaces between. I met two kids tonight, Jacob signed to the photograph. It was something he did sometimes, when the loneliness got too heavy. Talk to her, pretend she could still hear him in whatever way hearing worked after death. Deaf twin Sar, 6 years old, scared and alone and ignored by everyone. Sound familiar? The photograph didn't answer. Of course it didn't. I helped them, he continued, or I tried to. I don't know if I did it right. Don't know if I said the right things or made the right promises. But I tried, Sarah. I tried to be what the world should have been for you. His hands faltered, dropping to his sides. I miss you. God, I miss you so much, every single day. And I know you'd tell me to stop wallowing, stop existing, and start living again. But I don't know how, Sarah. I don't know how to live in a world without you in it. He stood there for a long time, alone in the dark, the weight of 3 years pressing down on his shoulders. Then slowly, he straightened. But tonight, for the first time since you left, I felt something. Something other than tired and sad and empty. Those kids looked at me like I mattered, like I could make a difference, like maybe, just maybe, there was still a reason for me to keep going. He touched the frame gently, fingertips brushing against the glass. I don't know if you sent them to me. I don't know if the universe works that way, but I'm choosing to believe it does. I'm choosing to believe that you're still looking out for me somehow, even now. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you for teaching me your language. Thank you for showing me what it means to really see someone. Thank you for loving me in ways I'm still trying to understand. And thank you for Noah and Nora. I'll take care of them, Sarah. I promise. I'll be what you deserved, what they deserve. I'll be the voice that speaks up when no one else will. Jacob wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and finally turned on the lights. The apartment didn't feel quite so empty anymore. It would tomorrow, and the day after that, and probably for a long time to come. But tonight there was something new. Hope. Fragile and uncertain and probably foolish, but hope nonetheless. Hope that maybe, just maybe, a broken single dad and an overwhelmed young woman and 2 beautiful deaf children had found each other for a reason. Hope that the silence didn't have to be lonely. Hope that family could be built from the strangest, most unexpected pieces. Jacob walked to his bedroom, set his alarm for 5 a.m., and lay down in the dark. For the first time in 3 years, he fell asleep thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday. And somewhere across town, in a small apartment crowded with hand-me-down furniture and paperwork, and the weight of too much responsibility, Emily Hart tucked her siblings into bed, signed I love you against their small palms, and allowed herself to believe that things might actually get better. That help had arrived. That she wasn't alone anymore. Noah and Nora fell asleep holding hands, their faces peaceful in ways Emily hadn't seen in months. And outside, the night wrapped around all of them. The single dad in his empty apartment, the young woman in her crowded one, the twin children in their shared bed, binding them together in ways none of them could yet understand. The first chapter of their story had been written. The rest was waiting to unfold. 3 days passed before Emily found the courage to use the number Jacob had scribbled on that receipt. She stared at it for hours that first night, the paper creased and soft from being folded and unfolded so many times. Part of her wanted to believe, desperately, achingly wanted to believe, that this stranger with the kind eyes and the fluent hands would actually follow through. But experience had taught her better. People made promises all the time. People said they wanted to help, offered phone numbers and sympathetic smiles, then disappeared the moment things got inconvenient. Her own father had been the first to teach her that lesson. So she tucked the receipt into her wallet and told herself she wouldn't need it. Told herself she'd been handling everything alone for 3 years and she could keep handling it. told herself that depending on anyone, especially a man she'd known for less than 2 hours, was a recipe for disappointment. Then Monday happened. It started at 6 in the morning when Noah woke up with a fever of 102 and a rash spreading across his chest. Emily took one look at him and felt her stomach drop. She knew that rash. She'd seen it before, 2 years ago, when both twins had caught scarlet fever and she'd spent a week sleeping on the floor between their beds, terrified she'd wake up and find one of them had stopped breathing. "Okay," she whispered to herself, already reaching for her phone. "Okay, doctor. We need a doctor." But their regular pediatrician didn't open until 9, and the urgent care clinic across town had a 4-hour wait according to their automated system. The emergency room was an option, but the last time Emily had taken the twins there, she'd spent 8 hours in a waiting room where no one could communicate with Noah and Nora, where nurses had shouted at them as if volume could somehow penetrate deafness, where a doctor had actually asked Emily why she hadn't fixed her siblings' hearing yet. She couldn't do that again. Not today. Not with Noah already scared and feverish and signing weakly that his throat hurt. The receipt was in her hand before she realized she'd opened her wallet. Her fingers trembled as she typed the number into her phone. It rang twice. "Hello?" Jacob's voice was rough with sleep but alert, the voice of someone used to early morning calls. "Jacob? It's Emily. Emily Hart from the cafe. I'm so sorry to call so early, but what's wrong?" All traces of sleepiness vanished instantly. "Are the twins okay?" "Noah's sick. Fever, rash, sore throat. I think it might be scarlet fever again. I need to get him to a doctor, but there's no interpreter available until Wednesday, and the ER is..." Her voice cracked. "The ER is a nightmare. They don't know how to talk to him, and he gets so scared when he can't understand what's happening. And I can't be in the room during examinations because I'm not his legal guardian, even though I'm the only family he has, and..." "Emily." Jacob's voice cut through her spiral, calm and steady. "Breathe. Where do you live?" She gave him the address. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Get Noah ready to go. Pack a bag with some snacks and a comfort item, whatever helps him feel safe." "And Emily?" "Yes?" "It's going to be okay. We'll figure this out together." The line went dead. Emily stood in her tiny kitchen, phone clutched to her chest, and did something she hadn't done in a very long time. She believed him. Jacob arrived in 18 minutes, still wearing the clothes he'd clearly thrown on in a hurry. Jeans, a wrinkled t-shirt, work boots untied. His hair was uncombed and there was toothpaste at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were focused and alert as Emily opened the door. "Where is he?" "Bedroom. Back of the apartment." Jacob moved past her without hesitation, navigating the cramped space like he belonged there. Emily followed, her heart hammering. Noah was curled up in the bed he shared with Nora, his small body wrapped in blankets despite the fever burning through him. Nora sat beside him, one hand on his arm, her face pinched with worry. When she saw Jacob, her expression shifted to relief so profound it made Emily's chest ache. "Friend Jacob!" Nora signed frantically. "Noah is sick. He's very hot and his throat hurts, and he won't eat breakfast." Jacob knelt beside the bed, bringing himself down to Noah's eye level. "Hey, buddy," he signed gently. "I heard you're not feeling so good." Noah's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Jacob for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was real or fever dream. "My throat hurts," he signed weakly. "And I'm cold, but Emily says I'm hot." "That doesn't make sense. That's called a fever," Jacob explained. "Your body is fighting germs inside you, and sometimes the fight makes you feel cold, even when you're actually warm." "It's confusing, I know. Am I going to die?" The question hit Jacob like a physical blow. He forced himself to keep his expression calm. "No, buddy. Absolutely not. You're going to see a doctor, and the doctor is going to give you medicine, and in a few days you're going to feel much better, I promise." "Doctors are scary," Noah signed. "They talk, and I can't understand, and they touch me with cold things, and it hurts. I know, but I'm coming with you today, and I'm going to translate everything the doctor says, and tell them everything you want to say, and I won't leave your side for a single second. Okay?" Noah stared at him. "You promise?" Jacob raised his hand, pinky extended. "I promise." A small, weak smile crossed Noah's feverish face. He lifted his own hand, hooked his tiny pinky around Jacob's larger one, and the deal was sealed. They took Emily's car because Jacob's truck had a busted heater, and the morning air was cold enough to make Noah's fever worse. Jacob sat in the back with the twins, Noah curled against his side with his head on Jacob's shoulder. Nora pressed close on the other side with her hand clutching Jacob's sleeve like she was afraid he might disappear. Emily watched them in the rearview mirror and felt tears prick her eyes. This was what it was supposed to look like. This was what having help actually meant. The urgent care clinic was a squat brick building on the west side of town, its parking lot already half full despite the early hour. Emily pulled into a spot near the entrance and turned to look at Jacob. "I should warn you," she said quietly. "This place isn't great. The staff is fine, mostly, but they don't have any deaf patients usually. They're not going to know how to handle—" "I've got it." Jacob's voice was confident. "Just follow my lead."
Bon moti.
They walked in together, Noah cradled in Jacob's arms because the little boy was too weak and tired to walk. The waiting room was crowded. A crying toddler in one corner, an elderly man with a cough in another, a teenager clutching her stomach near the check-in desk. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. Jacob walked straight to the front desk. "We need to see a doctor," he said to the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Patricia. "This boy has a high fever, a rash, and a sore throat, possible scarlet fever." Patricia barely looked up from her computer. "Sign in on the clipboard, take a number, we'll call you when it's your turn." "How long is the wait?" 3 hours, give or take." "This child is 6 years old with a fever of 102. He's also deaf and requires an interpreter for all medical communication. Do you have interpreter services available?" Now Patricia looked up, her expression shifting from boredom to something more guarded. "We don't have interpreters on staff. You'll have to provide your own." "I am the interpreter." Jacob's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I'm fluent in American Sign Language, and I'll be translating for Noah throughout his examination and treatment. I need that documented in his chart so there's no confusion when we're called back." Patricia blinked. "Sir, it's a legal requirement under the ADA," Jacob continued, his tone never rising but somehow growing more authoritative with every word. "Healthcare facilities are required to provide effective communication for deaf and hard-of-hearing patients. If you don't have an interpreter on staff, you're required to accept a qualified interpreter provided by the patient's family. I'm that interpreter. Now, can we get Noah registered, or do I need to speak with your supervisor about compliance issues?" The transformation in Patricia's demeanor was immediate. She sat up straighter, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Name of the patient?" "Noah Hart. Date of birth, March 15th, 2018. Relationship to patient?" Jacob hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Emily stepped forward. "I'm his sister and legal caregiver, Emily Hart. Jacob is a family friend who serves as our ASL interpreter." Patricia typed rapidly. "Insurance?" Emily provided the information. Medicaid, the only thing standing between her family and financial ruin every time one of the twins got sick. Patricia processed it all without comment, printed out a stack of forms and handed them over. "Fill these out and bring them back. Someone will call Noah's name when it's time." They found seats in a relatively quiet corner of the waiting room. Emily filled out the paperwork while Jacob sat with both twins, keeping up a steady stream of signed conversation designed to distract Noah from his misery and Nora from her worry. "Did you know that doctors used to think fevers were caused by evil spirits?" Jacob signed to them. "Hundreds of years ago, people believed that when you got sick, it meant a tiny demon had crawled inside your body and made itself at home." "That's silly," Nora signed, her nose wrinkling. "Everyone knows germs make you sick. Emily taught us about germs." "You're absolutely right, but back then they didn't have microscopes, so they couldn't see germs. They had to make up explanations for things they didn't understand." "What did they do to get rid of the demons?" Noah asked, his sign sluggish but curious. "Oh, all kinds of crazy things. They would dance around and shake rattles. Sometimes they would put leeches on people. Those are like little worm creatures that suck your blood. Gross." Both twins signed simultaneously, their faces screwed up in matching expressions of disgust. Jacob grinned. "I know, right? Aren't you glad we live in modern times where doctors just give you medicine instead of covering you in blood-sucking worms?" Noah considered this. I guess the doctor isn't so bad compared to leeches. Exactly. See? Perspective helps. Emily finished the paperwork and returned it to the desk, then came back to sit beside Jacob. She watched him with the twins, the easy way he communicated, the patience in his movements, the genuine affection in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. You're really good with them, she said quietly. Jacob shrugged. They're easy to be good with. No, I mean, Emily struggled to articulate what she was feeling. You treat them like people. Complete, whole people who happen to communicate differently, not like problems to be solved or burdens to be managed, just people. Because that's what they are. You'd be amazed how many adults don't understand that. Jacob was quiet for a moment, his hands still as Noah dozed against his shoulder. Sarah used to say that the hardest part of being deaf wasn't the silence, he said finally. It was the way hearing people looked at her, like she was broken, like there was something fundamentally wrong with her that needed to be fixed. She said she could handle not hearing music or birds or voices. What she couldn't handle was being treated like less than human just because her ears didn't work the same as everyone else's. Emily nodded slowly. The twins get that look all the time, from teachers, from doctors, from random people on the street. It's like they can't see past the deafness to the actual children underneath. That's why representation matters. That's why having people in their lives who speak their language matters. Jacob looked down at Noah's sleeping face. These kids need to know they're not alone. They need to see adults who understand them, who advocate for them, who show them that being deaf doesn't make them less valuable or less capable or less worthy of love. Is that what Sarah had? That kind of support? Eventually. Her family was complicated. Her parents were hearing and they never really learned to sign fluently. She grew up feeling isolated in her own home, like a stranger among people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. It wasn't until she went to Gallaudet for college that she found her community, found people who understood her without translation. Jacob's voice softened. She used to say that discovering the deaf community was like finding out she'd been wearing shoes on the wrong feet her whole life. Suddenly, everything fit, everything made sense. I want that for Noah and Nora, Emily said fiercely. I want them to have community, to have role models, to have people who make them feel like they belong. They will. We'll make sure of it. The conviction in his voice made Emily's throat tighten. Why do you keep saying we? You barely know us. You have no obligation to talk. I know what it's like to watch someone I love struggle in a world that wasn't built for them. Jacob met her eyes. And I know what it's like to feel helpless in the face of that struggle. To want to fix everything and not be able to. To lie awake at night wondering if you're doing enough, being enough. He shook his head. You're doing this alone because you have to be. But you don't have to be anymore. Not if you don't want to. Before Emily could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. Noah Hart? Jacob rose carefully, Noah still cradled against his chest. Nora grabbed Emily's hand, and together, the four of them followed the nurse back through the maze of corridors to an examination room. The next hour was unlike any medical visit Emily had ever experienced with the twins. When the doctor entered, a young woman with a brisk manner and kind eyes, Jacob immediately stepped forward and introduced himself as Noah's interpreter. He explained that Noah was deaf, that he would be translating all communication in both directions, and that he expected the doctor to address Noah directly rather than speaking about him in third person. The doctor, to her credit, adapted quickly. Noah, she said, looking directly at the little boy while Jacob translated. I'm Dr. Chen. I'm going to take a look at you today and figure out what's making you feel so yucky. Is that okay? Noah watched Jacob's hands, then nodded slowly. She seems nice, he signed to Jacob. Her eyes are friendly. Jacob translated this for Dr. Chen, and the woman smiled. Thank you, Noah. I try to have friendly eyes. Now, can you tell me where it hurts? What followed was the most thorough, most compassionate medical examination Emily had ever witnessed. Dr. Chen took her time, explaining every step before she did it, waiting for Jacob to translate and for Noah to respond. When she needed to look at his throat, she let Noah hold the tongue depressor first so he could see what it felt like. When she checked his ears, she showed him the otoscope, and explained exactly what she was looking for. And through it all, Jacob translated. Every word, every question, every reassurance. He didn't editorialize or summarize. He conveyed Dr. Chen's exact meaning in sign, and Noah's exact responses in speech. He made himself a bridge between two worlds, and for the first time in her life, Emily saw her little brother receive medical care with the same dignity and respect as any hearing child. It was scarlet fever, as Emily had suspected. Dr. Chen prescribed antibiotics and rest, explained the dosing schedule carefully while Jacob translated, and even drew a little chart for Noah showing how the medicine would fight the germs inside his body. So the pills are like tiny soldiers? Noah signed, studying the chart. Exactly, Dr. Chen replied through Jacob. Tiny soldiers that march through your body and defeat all the bad germs. But you have to take every single pill, even after you start feeling better, because if you stop too soon, some of the germs might survive and make you sick again. I'll take them all, Noah signed solemnly. I don't want the germs to win. That's the spirit. When they finally left the clinic, Noah had a prescription in hand and a sticker on his shirt that read "Brave Patient" in cheerful letters. He was still feverish and tired, but there was a lightness to him that hadn't been there before. The relief of being understood, of being treated like a person instead of a problem. Jacob carried him to the car, and this time Nora didn't clutch his sleeve in fear. She held his hand freely, swinging it a little as they walked, signing one-handed about how brave her brother had been. Emily drove to the pharmacy while Jacob stayed in the car with the twins. When she came back out with the antibiotics, she found all three of them asleep. Jacob with his head tilted back against the seat, Noah curled in his lap, Nora pressed against his side with her thumb in her mouth. She stood there in the pharmacy parking lot for a long moment, just looking at them. This man, this stranger who had walked into their lives less than a week ago, had given up his morning, navigated a medical system that had never been designed for people like Noah, advocated fiercely for a child he had no legal or biological connection to, and was now sleeping in her cramped back seat with two kids draped over him, like he was their favorite blanket. Emily didn't believe in miracles. Life had beaten that capacity out of her years ago, but standing there in the pale morning light, watching Jacob's chest rise and fall as Noah's small hand gripped his shirt, she wondered if maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe miracles didn't look like parting seas or burning bushes. Maybe miracles looked like a single father in a crowded cafe, noticing what no one else noticed, and choosing to reach out when he had every reason to walk away. She got in the car quietly, not wanting to wake them, and drove home through streets that suddenly seemed less gray. The days that followed established a rhythm none of them had anticipated. Jacob showed up at Emily's apartment every evening after work, still covered in construction dust, to help with homework and dinner and bedtime routines. He learned that Noah loved dinosaurs and dreamed of being a paleontologist, that Nora was obsessed with ballet and practiced pirouettes in the living room even though she'd never had a single lesson, that both twins were terrified of the dark but too proud to admit it. He learned that Emily worked two jobs, waitressing at a diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then cleaning offices from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., and slept an average of 4 hours a night. He learned that she hadn't bought herself new clothes in 3 years, that she cut her own hair to save money, that she skipped meals so the twins could have seconds. He learned that she was drowning, and slowly, carefully, he started throwing her lifelines. "You can't keep doing this alone," Jacob told her one night, 3 weeks into their new arrangement. They were sitting on her tiny balcony while the twins slept inside, sharing a pot of coffee that neither of them needed but both of them wanted. "The schedule you're running, it's not sustainable. You're going to collapse." Emily stared out at the parking lot below, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I don't have a choice. The bills don't stop just because I'm tired." "What about government assistance? Disability services? There have to be programs?" "There are." Emily's voice was flat. "And I've applied to all of them. But there are wait lists for everything. Wait list for subsidized housing. Wait list for deaf education services. Wait list for respite care. Wait list for the wait list." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know how long the average wait time is for an ASL interpreter in the school system? 8 months. 8 months of my siblings sitting in classrooms where they can't understand anything, falling further and further behind, while bureaucrats shuffle paperwork." Jacob's jaw tightened. "That's unacceptable." "That's reality." Emily finally looked at him. You want to know the worst part? The twins' father, our father, he could fix all of this. He has money. He had a good job, a house, a savings account. When he left, he took everything. Cleaned out the bank account, sold the house out from under us, disappeared to God knows where. And because he's not legally declared dead or absent, I can't access any of his benefits on the twins' behalf. I can't even file for child support because I don't have his address. He just vanished? Like smoke. Emily's grip on her mug tightened. I tried to find him. Hired a private investigator, back when I still had a little money saved. Nothing. It's like he stopped existing the day he walked out. Sometimes I wonder if he planned it that way, made himself unfindable on purpose so he'd never have to deal with the burden of his deaf children. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, processing the depth of betrayal in her words. My father left too, he said finally. Different circumstances, but similar outcome. I was 12, came home from school one day and his closet was empty. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. Emily turned to look at him. What did you do? What could I do? I was a kid. My mom fell apart, started drinking, stopped being able to hold down a job. I picked up the slack where I could. Paper routes, mowing lawns, anything that would bring in a few dollars. Dropped out of high school at 16 to work full time. Spent most of my 20s just trying to keep my head above water. Jacob shrugged. Sound familiar? Too familiar. Emily's voice was soft. When did things get better? When I met Sarah. Something shifted in Jacob's expression, a softening that Emily had come to recognize as his Sarah look. I was 23 working construction, living in a one-room apartment that smelled like mold no matter how much I cleaned it. She moved into the unit next door. First time I saw her, she was trying to carry a couch up the stairs by herself. This ridiculous oversized couch that was way too big for her apartment, way too heavy for one person. I offered to help. She smiled at me and signed thank you, and I had no idea what she was saying, but I knew right then that I was in trouble. Emily smiled. Love at first sight? Something like that. More like fascination at first sight that turned into love pretty quickly. Jacob's eyes had gone distant, lost in memory. She was so patient with me, taught me to sign, word by word, phrase by phrase. Never made me feel stupid for making mistakes. Never got frustrated when I forgot things or mixed up signs. She said learning to communicate with someone was an act of love, that every new word I learned was like giving her a gift. That's beautiful. She was beautiful, inside and out. Jacob's voice roughened. The day she died was the worst day of my life. Worse than my father leaving, worse than my mother's drinking, worse than anything. Because Sarah wasn't just my wife, she was my whole world. My best friend, my teacher, my home. Without her, I didn't know who I was anymore. Eva, Emily reached over and touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. No, it's okay. It's good to talk about her. For a long time, I couldn't say her name without falling apart. But lately, he trailed off, his gaze drifting back toward the apartment where Noah and Nora slept. Lately, it feels different. Like maybe remembering her doesn't have to be only pain. Like maybe I can hold on to the good parts without drowning in the grief. The twins do that to me too, Emily admitted. They're exhausting and expensive, and they test my patience every single day. But they're also the only thing that makes life feel worth living. The only thing that reminds me I'm not just surviving. I'm fighting for something, for someone. That's why I'm here, Jacob said quietly. That's why I keep coming back. Because for 3 years, I've had nothing to fight for. Nothing that made getting out of bed feel like anything other than a chore. But Noah and Nora, he shook his head. Those kids need someone in their corner, someone who speaks their language, who understands their world, and maybe helping them helps me remember what it feels like to care about something again. They sat in silence after that, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. It was Emily who spoke first. I've been thinking about what you said, about needing help. She took a deep breath. There's a meeting next week at the twins' school, an IEP review. That's an individualized education program. It's supposed to determine what services and accommodations Noah and Nora get for the rest of the year. Her voice tightened. The last meeting was a disaster. They talked about my siblings like they weren't even in the room. made decisions about their education without bothering to ask what Noah and Nora actually wanted or needed. I tried to advocate for them, but I don't have the words, the knowledge. I don't know what they're legally entitled to. I'll come with you. Emily blinked. What? To the meeting. I'll come as their interpreter and their advocate. Jacob's expression had hardened into something fierce. Those kids deserve appropriate education services. They deserve teachers who can communicate with them, curriculum that's accessible to them, an environment where they can actually learn. And if the school isn't providing that, we're going to make them understand exactly why that's unacceptable. Jacob, you have work. I'll take the morning off. You can't afford to take time off. I can't afford not to. He turned to face her fully. Emily, listen to me. I know we haven't known each other long. I know this whole thing is unconventional and maybe a little crazy. But I made a promise to those kids. I told them I'd be in their corner, and I meant it. His eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. So let me help. Not because I pity you or because I think you can't handle it alone. I know you can. You've been handling it alone for 3 years, and you're still standing, which makes you one of the strongest people I've ever met. But you shouldn't have to be that strong all the time. You shouldn't have to fight every battle by yourself. Let me stand beside you. Let me be your backup. Let me help you give those kids the life they deserve. Emily felt tears sliding down her cheeks and made no move to wipe them away. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you care so much about us? Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because when Sarah died, I promised myself I would honor her memory. I would live the way she lived, fighting for accessibility, for equality, for the dignity of people the world tried to overlook. But then the grief hit, and I couldn't do anything except survive. I stopped fighting, stopped caring, stopped being the person she believed I could be. He swallowed hard. But then I walked into that cafe and saw 2 little kids signing desperately for help, while everyone around them looked away. And something woke up inside me, something that had been sleeping for 3 years. He turned to face Emily, and she saw tears glistening in his eyes. You and Noah and Nora, you gave me my purpose back. You reminded me that there are still battles worth fighting, still people worth defending. You made me feel like Sarah's death didn't have to be the end of everything good in my life. His voice cracked. So why do I care so much about you? Because you saved me, Emily. You and those 2 incredible kids. You saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving. Emily didn't remember moving. One moment she was sitting on her side of the balcony, and the next she was in Jacob's arms, both of them holding on to each other like survivors of the same shipwreck. She cried against his shoulder, ugly, heaving sobs that she'd been holding back for 3 years. Cried for her mother, who had loved the twins so fiercely and died too soon. Cried for her father, who had chosen selfishness over family. Cried for all the lonely nights and exhausting days and the constant, crushing weight of responsibility. And Jacob held her. Didn't shoosh her or tell her it would be okay or offer empty platitudes. Just held her, one hand stroking her hair, letting her fall apart in his arms, because he understood that sometimes falling apart was the only way to put yourself back together. When the tears finally subsided, Emily pulled back and wiped her face with shaking hands. I'm sorry, she mumbled. I don't usually... I never... Don't apologize. Jacob's voice was firm. Never apologize for being human. She laughed wetly. I feel like a mess. You are a mess. So am I. So is everyone who's ever loved someone and lost them. The mess is just proof that we're still alive, still feeling, still fighting. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. The day you stop being a mess is the day you stop caring. And you, Emily Hart, care more than anyone I've ever met. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw her own exhaustion reflected in his eyes, her own grief, her own stubborn, desperate hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay, what? Okay, you can come to the IEP meeting. Okay, you can help with the twins. Okay, I'll stop trying to do everything alone. She took a shaky breath. Okay, I'll let you in. Jacob smiled, a real smile, one that transformed his tired face into something almost beautiful. That's all I'm asking. They sat on the balcony until the stars wheeled overhead and the night air grew cold, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of something neither of them had expected to find. Inside, Noah and Nora slept peacefully, their hands intertwined even in dreams. And for the first time in a very long time, the future didn't feel quite so frightening. The IEP meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Thursday. Jacob arrived at Emily's apartment at 7:30, wearing his only suit, a slightly outdated affair that had last seen daylight at Sarah's funeral, still carrying a faint trace of mothballs despite being aired out for a week. Emily opened the door and stared. "What?" Jacob looked down at himself. "Is there something on my—" "You're wearing a suit." "It's a professional meeting. Professionals wear suits." "Jacob, I've never seen you in anything except flannel and work boots." "Well, now you've seen me in a suit." He grinned. "Try to contain your amazement." Despite her nerves, Emily laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to not be walking into this meeting alone. The twins were ready too, dressed in their best clothes. A button-up shirt for Noah, a purple dress for Nora that she'd picked out herself because purple is the color of royalty and I am a princess. They vibrated with a mixture of excitement and anxiety, not fully understanding what the meeting was about, but catching the tension in the air. "Are we going somewhere important?" Noah asked Jacob as they walked to the car. "Very important. We're going to talk to your teachers and some other adults about how to make school better for you. Can you make them give us more recess?" Nora signed hopefully. "I can try." "No promises." "What about less math?" Jacob laughed. "Nice try." "Math is important." Nora sighed dramatically, the kind of exaggerated theatrical sigh that only a 6-year-old could pull off, and climbed into the car. The school was a sprawling brick building on the edge of town, its playground equipment rust-spotted and its paint faded with age. Not a bad school exactly, but clearly underfunded, the kind of place that did its best with limited resources and even more limited attention from the outside world. They were directed to a conference room on the second floor where a long table had been set up with chairs around it. Several people were already seated. A middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Principal Morrison, a younger woman named Ms. Chen, who was apparently the twins' current teacher, an older man from the special education department, and a woman from the district office who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. No interpreter. Jacob noticed this immediately. "Before we begin," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made the principal sit up straighter, "I want to confirm that interpretation services have been arranged for Noah and Nora." Principal Morrison shuffled some papers. "Well, we did request an interpreter from the district, but unfortunately none were available. That's unacceptable." The principal's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" Under IDEA and the ADA, these children have a legal right to effective communication in all educational settings, including IEP meetings where decisions about their education are being made. Jacob kept his voice level, but his words were precise as scalpels. "You've known about this meeting for weeks. If district interpreters weren't available, you were obligated to find alternative arrangements, video remote interpreting, hiring a freelance interpreter, something. The fact that Noah and Nora's own IEP meeting was scheduled without ensuring they could participate is not just negligent, it's a violation of their civil rights." The room had gone very still. Principal Morrison cleared her throat. "Mr. Miles, I understand your concern, but I'm not finished." Jacob leaned forward slightly. "However, since I'm here and I'm a fluent ASL interpreter, I'll translate for the children today. But I want it noted in the official record that the school failed to provide interpretation services, and I want assurances that this will not happen again at any future meeting involving Noah and Nora Hart." He looked at the woman from the district office. "Can you note that in the record?" She blinked rapidly, clearly unused to being put on the spot. Yes. Yes, I can do that. Thank you." Emily watched this exchange with something approaching awe. She'd known Jacob was passionate about advocacy. He'd told her about Sarah's battles, about his own growing commitment to the cause. But seeing him in action was something else entirely. He was calm, professional, and absolutely uncompromising. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just quietly, implacably insistent on what was right. The meeting began. Principal Morrison outlined the twins' current educational status. They were in a mainstream first grade classroom with support services that consisted of an aide who didn't know sign language and occasional visits from a deaf education specialist who was spread across 6 schools and could only stop by twice a month. As you can see, the principal concluded, we're doing everything we can within our current resources. With respect, Jacob said, what you're describing isn't deaf education, it's benign neglect. The principal's face tightened. That's a strong accusation. It's an accurate one. Jacob turned to Ms. Chen, the classroom teacher. Can you communicate directly with Noah and Nora in ASL? Ms. Chen's cheeks flushed. I've learned some basic signs. Basic signs meaning what? Hello, goodbye, sit down. Yes, essentially. So how do you teach them? How do you explain new concepts, check their understanding, help them when they're confused? I try to use visual aids, written instructions for 6-year-olds who are still learning to read. Jacob shook his head. These children are deaf, not incapable of learning, but they can't learn if no one in their classroom can communicate with them. They're falling behind not because they're not intelligent, but because they're being denied access to education in their own language. Emily watched Noah and Nora during this exchange. Jacob was translating everything, keeping them informed, and she saw understanding dawn in their small faces, the realization that someone was fighting for them, that their struggles were being acknowledged. The man is saying the school needs to help us more, Noah signed to his sister, his eyes wide. Because we can't learn if no one talks to us, Nora signed back. I always thought I was just bad at school. You're not bad at school, Jacob signed to her, catching her statement. School has been bad at teaching you. That's different, and we're going to fix it. The meeting continued for 2 hours. Jacob presented research on deaf education best practices, cited specific legal requirements for appropriate services, and made it clear that the current arrangement was not just inadequate, but actively harming the twins' educational development. By the end, Principal Morrison looked like she'd been through a war. What exactly are you asking for, Mr. Miles? Jacob handed her a document, a list he and Emily had worked on together over the past week. Full-time interpreter services in the classroom, a deaf education specialist on site at least 3 days a week, staff training in basic ASL for all teachers and aides who interact with Noah and Nora. And I want it written into their IEP with specific, measurable goals and timelines. The principal scanned the list. This would require significant budget reallocation. These children's right to an appropriate education isn't contingent on what's convenient for the budget. Silence stretched across the conference room. Finally, the woman from the district office spoke. We'll need to review this proposal with our legal team and budget committee. But I can say that Mr. Miles's points about compliance are well taken. We'll work on implementing appropriate services. How soon? I can't give you an exact timeline. Then give me an approximate one. The woman hesitated. 4 to 6 weeks for the interpreter services. The rest may take longer, but we'll prioritize. Jacob nodded slowly. I want progress reports, weekly updates on implementation. And I want it in writing that if services aren't in place within the specified time frame, the family has the right to pursue due process without prejudice. More shuffling of papers, more uncomfortable glances. Agreed, the principal said finally. We'll have the revised IEP document ready for signature by end of business tomorrow. The meeting adjourned. Emily gathered Noah and Nora, who were practically bouncing with energy after being still for so long, and they walked out into the hallway together. As soon as they were out of earshot of the conference room, Emily grabbed Jacob's arm. That was incredible, she breathed. I've never seen anyone handle a meeting like that. You were amazing. Jacob shrugged, but she could see the satisfaction in his eyes. I just knew what to say. Sarah taught me. She went to dozens of these meetings, fought dozens of these battles. I learned from watching her. Well, you learned well. Emily shook her head in disbelief. 4 to 6 weeks. They're actually going to provide services, real services. What does that mean? Nora signed, tugging on Emily's sleeve. What's going to happen? Emily knelt down to her sister's level. It means you're going to have an interpreter in your classroom, she signed. Someone who can help you understand everything the teacher says. Someone who can help you talk to your classmates. Nora's eyes went wide. Really? Every day? Every day. Noah! Nora turned to her brother, grabbing his hands. We're going to have someone who talks like us at school. Noah's face lit up in a grin so bright it made Emily's heart ache. Does that mean I won't have to guess what the teacher is saying anymore? No more guessing, Emily confirmed. You'll know everything, and people will understand when I answer questions? Yes, buddy, people will understand you. Noah threw his arms around Emily's waist, hugging her so tight she nearly lost her balance. Nora joined a moment later, and then somehow Jacob was part of it too, one arm around Emily's shoulders, the other resting on Noah's back. They stood like that in the empty school hallway, four people bound together by circumstance and choice, and something that felt increasingly like family. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a weight to be carried. It felt like a promise to be kept. The weeks following the IEP meeting brought changes that Emily had stopped daring to hope for. True to the district's reluctant promise, an interpreter arrived at the twins' school within 5 weeks. A young woman named Maria, who had grown up with deaf parents and signed with the fluid grace of a native speaker. Noah and Nora took to her immediately, their faces lighting up each morning when they saw her waiting outside their classroom door. For the first time in their educational lives, they could actually participate. They could raise their hands and answer questions. They could understand the stories their teacher read aloud. They could communicate with classmates who, under Maria's patient guidance, began learning basic signs themselves. Emily, Nora signed one evening, practically vibrating with excitement. Today a girl named Sophie asked me to play with her at recess. She signed friend and play, and I taught her the sign for princess because we were pretending to be princesses, and she said, Emily, that my signs are beautiful. Emily pulled her sister into a fierce hug, blinking back tears she didn't want Nora to see. Progress. Real, tangible progress. But progress, Emily was learning, had a way of making certain people uncomfortable. It started small, comments from other parents at pickup, glances that lingered a little too long, whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when Emily approached. She told herself she was imagining things, that the stress of the past few years had made her paranoid. Then the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, official and impersonal, bearing the logo of the school district in the corner. Emily opened it standing at her mailbox, scanning the dense legal language with growing confusion that slowly curdled into horror. Complaint filed regarding the allocation of special education resources. Concerns raised about the appropriateness of current services. Review scheduled for possible reassessment of IEP provisions. Someone had complained. Someone had actually filed a formal complaint about Noah and Nora receiving interpreter services. Emily read the letter 3 times, each reading making her angrier than the last. By the time Jacob arrived that evening for his now routine dinner visit, she was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. They can't do this, she said before he'd even closed the door. They cannot do this. We fought for those services. We proved they were legally required. They can't just take them away because some... Slow down. Jacob set down the bag of groceries he'd brought and took her by the shoulders. What happened? What's going on? Emily thrust the letter at him. She watched his face as he read, watched the confusion give way to understanding, then to a cold, quiet fury she'd never seen in him before. Who filed this? It doesn't say. Just concerned parties who believe the resources allocated to the twins could be better utilized elsewhere. Emily's voice cracked. Better utilized. Like my brother and sister's education is a waste of money. Like they don't deserve the same opportunities as everyone else. Jacob set the letter down on the counter very carefully, as if he was afraid of what his hands might do if he held it any longer. This isn't going to stand, he said quietly. Whoever filed this complaint doesn't understand the law. Interpreter services aren't optional accommodations that can be reallocated based on budget preferences. They're mandated services for deaf students. The school can't legally reduce or remove them just because someone complained. But what if they try? What if they use this as an excuse to... They won't, Jacob's voice was iron, because we're going to that review meeting and we're going to make it absolutely clear that Noah and Nora's services are non-negotiable. And if they push back, we'll involve disability rights advocates, lawyers, the media if we have to. He met Emily's eyes. I told you I'd fight for those kids. I meant it. Emily wanted to believe him. She did believe him mostly, but 3 years of fighting alone had taught her that belief wasn't always enough. that sometimes the world crushed good intentions under the weight of bureaucracy and indifference. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "I'm so scared that we're going to lose everything we gained." Jacob pulled her into his arms, holding her the way he'd learned she needed to be held, firmly, steadily, like an anchor in a storm. "You're not alone anymore," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever happens, we face it together." They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who had learned to survive alone, slowly remembering what it felt like to lean on someone else. From the doorway of the kitchen, two small figures watched in silence. Noah with his thumb in his mouth, Nora with her hand pressed to her heart. "Emily's scared," Noah signed to his sister. "Friend Jacob is helping," Nora signed back. "He always helps. I'm glad he found us." "Me too." The review meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Jacob took the entire day off work despite Emily's protests about his paycheck, and they arrived at the school an hour early to prepare. The conference room was the same one they'd used for the IEP meeting, but something about it felt different today, colder, more hostile. Maybe it was the fluorescent lights flickering slightly overhead. Maybe it was the tight expressions on the faces of the district officials as they filed in. Maybe it was the presence of two people Emily had never seen before. A man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as a concerned parent representative, and a woman with sharp eyes who claimed to be from some kind of taxpayer advocacy group. Emily's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a routine review. This was an ambush. "Thank you all for coming," Principal Morrison began, her voice carrying none of the warmth she'd shown in previous meetings. "We're here today to discuss concerns that have been raised about the current service allocation for Noah and Nora Hart." "Before we begin," the man in the expensive suit interrupted, "I'd like to state for the record that my concerns are not personal. I have nothing against the Hart children, but as a parent of 3 students in this district, I have a responsibility to ensure that educational resources are being used effectively and equitably." "Could you define equitably in this context?" Jacob asked, his voice calm but edged. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Certainly. The interpreter services currently provided to the Hart twins represent a significant budget expenditure, approximately $40,000 annually. That money could fund additional teaching assistants, technology upgrades, enrichment programs that would benefit dozens of students rather than just 2. "So your definition of equity is majority rule," Jacob said. "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." "I wouldn't phrase it that way." "But that's what you're saying. You're arguing that deaf children don't deserve equal access to education because accommodating their needs costs more than accommodating hearing children." The man's face reddened. "I'm arguing for fiscal responsibility." "You're arguing for discrimination." Jacob's voice never rose, but it cut through the room like a blade. "What you're calling fiscal responsibility is actually suggesting that disabled children should receive fewer services because their disabilities are inconvenient for the budget. That's not equity. That's exclusion dressed up in accounting language." The woman from the taxpayer group leaned forward. "Mr. Miles, no one is suggesting discrimination. We're simply asking whether there might be more cost-effective ways to serve these children. Have alternatives been explored? Residential deaf schools, for instance, or you want to send them away." Emily's voice emerged strangled with fury. "You want to take my brother and sister from their home, from their family, and ship them off to some institution because their existence is too expensive for your budget." "Ms. Hart, please calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." Emily was on her feet now, trembling with rage. "Don't you dare tell me to calm down when you're sitting there suggesting that my siblings should be removed from their community because they're deaf. Noah and Nora are 6 years old. They've already lost their mother and been abandoned by their father. And now you want to take them from the only family they have left because you don't want to pay for an interpreter?" "Emily." Jacob's hand on her arm, gentle but firm. "Sit down. Let me handle this." She sat, but her hands were shaking, her eyes burning with unshed tears. Jacob turned to Principal Morrison. "I'd like clarification on something. This meeting was called to review the twins' IEP services. Is the district actually considering reducing or eliminating those services based on the complaints raised here today?" The principal shifted uncomfortably. "We're obligated to consider all input from stakeholders." "That's not what I asked." Is the district considering removing interpreter services from Noah and Nora Hart? A long pause. The district is exploring options. What options specifically? Another pause, longer this time. The principal glanced at the district official, who glanced at the man in the expensive suit, who smiled that cold, satisfied smile. There are alternative placements that might better serve the children's needs, the district official said finally. The State School for the Deaf, for instance, has excellent facilities. The State School for the Deaf is 300 miles away. Jacob's voice had gone flat. You're talking about removing these children from their home, their sister, everyone they know and love, and placing them in a residential facility where they'd see their family a few times a year at most. He shook his head slowly. That's not serving their needs. That's serving your budget at the expense of their well-being. Mr. Miles, let me be very clear about something. Jacob stood, his full height suddenly seeming much more imposing in the cramped conference room. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Noah and Nora Hart have the right to a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment for these children is their neighborhood school, with their peers, with interpreter services that allow them to access the curriculum. Sending them to a residential facility 300 miles away is not the least restrictive environment. It's the most restrictive option possible, short of institutionalization. He turned to face the man in the expensive suit directly. I don't know who you are or why you've decided to make these children's education your personal crusade, but I want you to understand something. Every argument you've made today, every word about fiscal responsibility and equitable resource allocation has been an argument against the civil rights of disabled children. You are sitting in a public school, in a meeting about 2 6-year-olds, advocating for their removal from their family and community because you don't want your tax dollars spent on their accessibility needs. The man's face had gone from red to purple. Now see here, I haven't finished. Jacob's voice dropped to something just above a whisper, but somehow it filled the room. My wife was deaf. For 12 years, I watched her fight battles just like this one. Battles against people who thought her needs were too expensive, too inconvenient, too much trouble. She fought those battles with grace and dignity and an unshakable belief that disabled people deserve the same rights as everyone else. She died 3 years ago, but her fight didn't die with her. I'm standing here today because of her. Because she taught me that accessibility isn't a luxury, it's a human right. And I will not sit silently while people like you try to strip that right away from 2 innocent children. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Emily looked around the room and saw expressions ranging from uncomfortable to ashamed to, in the case of the man in the expensive suit, barely concealed fury. It was the woman from the taxpayer group who finally spoke, her voice subdued. Perhaps we've been approaching this from the wrong angle. The man turned to her sharply. Margaret, no, Richard, Mr. Miles is right. Whatever our concerns about budget allocation, we can't advocate for removing children from their families. That's not fiscal responsibility. That's cruelty. She gathered her papers and stood. I apologize for my participation in this meeting. I was told it was about exploring cost-saving measures, not about displacing children. I want no part of this. She left without looking back. The man, Richard, sat very still for a moment, his jaw working. Then he stood abruptly. This isn't over, he said to no one in particular. I have every right to be concerned about how my tax dollars are spent, and I will continue to pursue this through appropriate channels. You do that, Jacob said calmly. And while you're pursuing it, I'll be documenting every meeting, every comment, every suggestion that these children be removed from their family because of their disability. I'm sure the Office for Civil Rights will find it very interesting reading. Richard's face went pale. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the room. The door slammed behind him. Principal Morrison let out a breath that seemed to deflate her entire body. Well, she said weakly, that was unexpected. What was unexpected, Jacob said, still standing, was that this meeting happened at all. You allowed outside parties with no legitimate standing to participate in a confidential IEP review. You allowed them to advocate for removing children from their family. You let this circus go on for, he checked his watch, 45 minutes before anyone from the school or district pushed back. The principal winced. Mr. Miles, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset. I'm disappointed. Jacob sat back down, his voice returning to its normal, calm register. I thought we'd reached an understanding at our last meeting. I thought the district was committed to serving Noah and Nora appropriately. Instead, I find out that their services are being treated as negotiable commodities that can be reconsidered every time someone files a complaint. The services aren't being reconsidered, the district official said quickly, clearly eager to defuse the situation. Mr. Hamilton's complaints have no legal merit. We were obligated to address them formally, but the outcome of this meeting was never in doubt. Then why were we subjected to this? Emily demanded. Why did we have to sit here and listen to someone argue that my siblings should be sent away? The district official had no answer for that. Jacob reached across the table and took Emily's hand. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. Noah and Nora's services continue as outlined in their current IEP. Any future complaints from Mr. Hamilton or anyone else are reviewed internally without requiring the family to attend meetings that have no legitimate basis. And the district provides written confirmation that the twins' interpreter services are protected and non-negotiable for the duration of their enrollment. Mr. Miles, we can't guarantee you can and you will, because the alternative is a formal complaint to the Office for Civil Rights, followed by contact with every disability rights organization in the state, followed by a very public lawsuit that will make it clear exactly how this district treats its deaf students. Jacob paused. I don't want to do any of that. I want to focus on helping these kids learn and grow. But I will burn this entire system to the ground before I let anyone take them from their family. Do we understand each other? Another long silence. Then the district official nodded slowly. We understand each other, Mr. Miles. Good. Jacob stood again, pulling Emily up with him. Then we're done here. They walked out of the conference room together, Emily's legs shaking so badly she wasn't sure they'd carry her. Jacob kept his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the hallways, past the office, out into the parking lot where the spring sunshine seemed almost aggressively cheerful. She made it to the car before she broke. The sobs came from somewhere deep, a well of emotion she hadn't known existed. Jacob held her against the side of her Honda, shielding her from passing cars, letting her cry until there was nothing left. It's okay, he murmured. It's over. They're safe. That man, Emily gasped between sobs. He wanted to send them away. He looked at two little kids and decided they weren't. I know. If you hadn't been there, if I'd been alone. But you weren't alone. You'll never be alone in this again, Emily. I promise you. She pulled back, looking at him with red-rimmed eyes. Why do you keep making promises you can't be sure you can keep? Jacob cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away tears. Because keeping promises is what I do. It's who I am. And because... He stopped, something flickering in his expression, vulnerable and uncertain in a way she'd never seen from him before. Because what? Because I love those kids, he said softly. And I love you. Emily's breath caught. Jacob, you don't have to say anything back. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know. I needed you to understand why I fight so hard, why I can't imagine walking away from this, from you. His voice roughened. After Sarah died, I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again, didn't think I wanted to. But then I walked into that cafe and saw two little kids signing for help, and I saw you, exhausted and brave and fighting so hard for them, and something woke up inside me, something I thought had died with her. I'm scared, Emily whispered. I know, so am I. I've never been good at letting people in. Neither have I, not since Sarah. What if this doesn't work? What if we mess it up and the twins get hurt? Jacob was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Then we do our best to make sure they don't, he said finally. We put them first, always. We communicate, even when it's hard. We fight for each other the way we fight for them. He smiled slightly. And if we mess up anyway, we apologize and try again. That's all anyone can do. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes that came from grief and hard work and too little sleep, at the calluses on his hands that told the story of years of physical labor, at the kindness in his expression that had been there since the first moment he signed hello to two frightened children. She thought about all the nights he'd shown up at her apartment with groceries and homework help and infinite patience. She thought about the way he communicated with Noah and Nora, not as obligations or burdens, but as whole people deserving of respect and attention. She thought about the way he'd stood in that conference room and fought for them like they were his own. She thought about how long it had been since anyone had fought for her. "I love you too," she said. The words came out rusty, unpracticed, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. But they were true. Truer than anything she'd said in a very long time. Jacob's face transformed, the tension draining away to reveal something raw and hopeful beneath. He kissed her. It wasn't a passionate kiss, not really, just a gentle press of lips, a promise more than a claim. But Emily felt it all the way to her bones, felt something shift inside her like tectonic plates finding a new configuration. When they pulled apart, Jacob was smiling. "We should probably go pick up the kids." Emily laughed, the sound surprising her. "Yeah, we probably should." They got in the car and drove to the elementary school, where Maria was waiting with Noah and Nora in the after-school pickup area. The twins bounced toward the car with their usual energy, Maria waving goodbye with a warm smile. "Emily, friend Jacob," Nora signed as she scrambled into her car seat. "Maria said we did really good at reading today. I read a whole book by myself." "A whole book?" Emily signed back. "That's amazing, sweetheart. What was it about?" "A bunny who got lost and found her way home. It was a little bit scary, but it had a happy ending." Jacob twisted around in his seat to look at Noah, who was uncharacteristically quiet. "Hey, buddy, everything okay?" Noah nodded slowly, but his hand stayed still in his lap. "You sure? You can tell me if something's wrong." A long pause. Then Noah's hands moved, hesitant and small. "A boy at school said deaf people are broken. He said we can't hear because something's wrong with us." Emily felt her heart crack. Jacob's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind his eyes. "Can I tell you a secret?" he signed to Noah. Noah nodded. "Deaf people aren't broken. You know how I know?" "How?" "Because my wife was deaf. The person I loved most in the whole world couldn't hear a single sound. And she was the most beautiful, brilliant, amazing person I ever met. She could do anything hearing people could do, and a lot of things they couldn't. She was strong and brave, and she never let anyone make her feel less than." Noah's eyes had gone wide. "Your wife was like us?" "Yes, buddy. She was like you. And if anyone ever tells you that being deaf means something is wrong with you, you remember her. Remember that Jacob's wife was deaf, and she was wonderful. And so are you." Noah sat very still for a moment, processing this. Then his small face broke into a smile. "What was her name?" "Sarah." "That's a pretty name." "It was a pretty name for a pretty person." "Will you tell me more about her sometime?" Jacob's voice caught. "Yeah, buddy, I'll tell you all about her. As many stories as you want." Noah beamed and settled back into his seat, his earlier distress apparently forgotten. But Emily, watching from the driver's seat, saw the moisture glistening in Jacob's eyes, saw the way his hands trembled slightly as he turned back around, saw the cost of sharing that piece of his grief with a 6-year-old who needed to hear it. She reached over and took his hand. He squeezed back, hard. They drove home in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand each other without words. That night, after the twins were asleep, Jacob found himself standing on Emily's balcony again, staring up at the stars. Emily came out with 2 cups of tea and handed him one. "You okay?" "Yeah." He took a sip. "It's just been a long day." "That man, Richard, he really got to you, didn't he?" Jacob was quiet for a moment. "Sarah had to deal with people like him her whole life," he said finally. "People who looked at her and saw a problem to be solved instead of a person to be valued. People who thought her needs were inconvenient, her accommodations excessive. People who believed deep down that the world would be easier if people like her just didn't exist." Emily moved closer to him, her shoulder pressing against his. "She fought them," Jacob continued. Every single time. Wrote letters, attended meetings, testified at hearings. She never backed down, never let them see her hurt. His voice roughened. But I saw. I saw her cry in the car after those meetings. I saw her break down when she thought no one was watching. The fighting took a toll, even when she won. Is that why you fight so hard for the twins? Because you couldn't always protect Sarah? The question hung in the air, gentle but penetrating. Maybe, Jacob admitted. Or maybe I just can't stand seeing history repeat itself. Watching two more deaf kids grow up thinking they're less than, thinking they're broken, thinking they don't deserve the same things everyone else gets. He turned to face Emily. They're so young. They have so much potential. And I refuse to let the world crush that out of them the way it tried to crush it out of Sarah. It didn't crush it out of her, though. From everything you've told me, she stayed strong right until the end. She did. A ghost of a smile crossed Jacob's face. She was the strongest person I ever knew. But she shouldn't have had to be that strong. She shouldn't have had to fight for every scrap of dignity, every basic accommodation. She should have been able to just live, be herself, without constantly having to justify her existence to people who couldn't be bothered to learn her language. Emily was quiet for a long moment. I think about that a lot, she said finally. What it means to raise Noah and Nora in a world that wasn't built for them. How to prepare them for the fights they'll have to face without making them feel like everything is a battle. How to let them be kids while also teaching them to advocate for themselves. You're doing it right, Jacob said. You're giving them love and security and someone who will always be in their corner. The rest, the fighting, the advocating, we can handle that together. They don't have to carry that weight, not yet. But someday they will. Someday. But by then, hopefully, they'll have the tools and the confidence to carry it well. Jacob wrapped an arm around her shoulders. And they'll have each other. That's more than a lot of deaf kids get. They stood together in the darkness, watching the stars wheel overhead, finding comfort in each other's presence. After a while, Emily spoke again. What do you think that man, Richard, is going to do? He said it wasn't over. Jacob sighed. He'll probably file more complaints, make noise at school board meetings, try to rally other parents to his cause. And what do? We keep showing up. We keep fighting. We document everything, build our case, make sure the law is on our side. He squeezed her shoulder. And we don't let them see us scared. People like Richard feed on fear. The moment they think they've gotten to you, they double down. I am scared, though. I know, so am I. Jacob turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. But scared doesn't mean helpless. Scared means we care enough to be afraid of losing what we have. And caring that much? That's a strength, Emily, not a weakness. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. Thank you, she murmured, for everything, for being here, for fighting for us, for... She trailed off, struggling to find words big enough for what she wanted to say. You don't have to thank me. Jacob pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I'm exactly where I want to be. They stayed on the balcony until the tea grew cold and the stars began to fade toward dawn. Then they went inside to the small apartment that was somehow starting to feel like home and faced the new day together. The next few days were quiet, almost suspiciously so. Emily went to work. Jacob went to work. The twins went to school, where Maria continued to translate and their classmates continued to learn signs, and life seemed, for a brief, beautiful moment, almost normal. Then Friday came. Emily was wiping down tables at the diner during the afternoon lull when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Hart, this is Richard Hamilton. We need to talk. Meet me at Rosewood Cafe at 4 p.m. Come alone. Her blood went cold. Rosewood Cafe. The same cafe where she'd met Jacob. The same cafe where her siblings had been humiliated and ignored. It couldn't be a coincidence. She stared at the message for a long moment, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her not to go, not to engage with this man who had tried to tear her family apart. But another part of her, the part that had learned over 3 hard years that sometimes you had to face your enemies head on, whispered that she needed to know what he wanted. She texted back, I'll be there. Then she called Jacob. He answered on the first ring. Hey, everything okay? Richard Hamilton wants to meet me at the cafe in 2 hours. Silence on the line. I'm coming with you. He said to come alone. I don't care what he said. You're not meeting that man by yourself. Jacob, Emily. His voice was sharp with fear. This isn't negotiable. I'll wait outside, in the car, whatever, but I'm not letting you walk into that situation without backup. She closed her eyes, torn between independence and practicality. Okay, she said finally, but stay out of sight unless I need you. Deal. They arrived at Rosewood Cafe at 3:45. Jacob parked across the street, positioning himself where he could see the entrance but wouldn't be immediately visible. Emily walked in alone, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Richard Hamilton was already there, seated at a corner table, the same corner table where Noah and Nora had huddled in fear that first night. He was wearing another expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. Emily slid into the seat across from him. Ms. Hart, thank you for coming. What do you want? Richard's lips curved in something that might have been a smile. Direct. I appreciate that. He folded his hands on the table. I want to apologize. Emily blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't it. Excuse me? My behavior at the school meeting was inappropriate. I allowed my concerns about fiscal responsibility to blind me to the human element of the situation. He paused, something flickering in his eyes. I have a grandson. He's 4 years old. Last month he was diagnosed with autism. Emily said nothing, waiting. My son and his wife have been struggling, Richard continued, trying to find services, navigate the system, deal with people who look at their child and see a problem instead of a little boy who likes trains and refuses to wear socks. His voice roughened slightly. I've been one of those people. For years, I've advocated for reduced special education spending without understanding what that actually means for families like yours, families like my son's. So this is about guilt. Partly. Richard met her eyes. But it's also about trying to make things right. I can't undo what I said at that meeting. I can't unsay the things I suggested. But I can stop fighting against services for children like your siblings. I can use my influence to advocate for better funding instead of cuts. He paused. And I can apologize to you, personally, for the pain I caused. Emily studied him for a long moment, searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. Why are you telling me this? Why not just quietly change your position and move on? Because I owed you an explanation. And because, Richard hesitated, because that man who defended your siblings at the meeting, the one who talked about his deaf wife, he was right about everything. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I spent 30 years in business, Ms. Hart. I've negotiated million-dollar deals, faced down hostile boards, navigated corporate politics that would make your head spin, but I've never been dressed down the way Mr. Miles dressed me down in that conference room. And the worst part? I deserved every word. Emily didn't know what to say. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is for your siblings' education fund. It's not nearly enough to make up for what I tried to do, but it's a start. He slid the envelope across the table. And I've already contacted the school board to withdraw my complaints. They should have confirmation by Monday. Emily looked at the envelope without touching it. Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't some kind of trick? You don't. Richard stood, gathering his coat. You have every reason to distrust me, and I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. All I can do is try to do better, starting now. He paused at the edge of the table. Your siblings are lucky to have you, Ms. Hart. And that man, Miles, he's one of the good ones. Don't let him go. And then he was gone, leaving Emily alone at the corner table with an envelope she was afraid to open. She sat there for 5 full minutes before Jacob appeared in the doorway, his expression taut with concern. Emily, what happened? Are you okay? She held up the envelope wordlessly. Jacob crossed the cafe and slid into the seat Richard had vacated. What is that? He apologized. Emily's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and detached. He apologized and withdrew his complaints and gave me this, and I don't know what to do with any of it. Jacob took the envelope gently from her hands and opened it. His eyes widened. Emily, this is a check for $50,000. The world seemed to tilt slightly. What? $50,000. made out to an education fund for Noah and Nora Hart. Jacob looked up at her, stunned. This could pay for years of services. Tutoring, enrichment programs, summer camps for deaf kids. I can't accept that. Emily's voice was sharp. I can't take money from the man who tried to send my siblings away. Emily, no. She shook her head fiercely. I don't care if he's sorry. I don't care if his grandson is autistic and he's had some kind of epiphany. You don't get to try to destroy someone's family and then buy your way back into their good graces with a check. Jacob was quiet for a moment, turning the check over in his hands. You're right, he said finally. He doesn't get to buy forgiveness. That's not how this works. He set the check on the table between them. But this money could change Noah and Nora's lives. It could give them opportunities they'd never have otherwise. Summer programs at deaf schools, technology to help them communicate, college funds. It feels wrong. I know, but maybe... Jacob hesitated. Maybe accepting it isn't about forgiving him. Maybe it's about taking what he owes and using it to build the life those kids deserve. The life he tried to take from them. He met her eyes. You don't have to be grateful. You don't have to feel anything except anger and suspicion. But you can still take the money and make something good out of his guilt. Emily stared at the check, her emotions churning. $50,000. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Money that could change everything. That could give Noah and Nora the kind of support she'd only dreamed of providing. And all it cost was swallowing her pride and accepting help from a man she despised. She thought about the twins, about Noah's dream of being a paleontologist, and Nora's ballet princess fantasies, about all the doors that would open with proper funding, proper support, proper opportunities. Slowly, reluctantly, she picked up the check. I hate this, she said. I know. I hate him. I know that too. But I love my siblings more than I hate him. Emily folded the check and slipped it into her pocket. So I'll take his money, and I'll use it to give them the life he tried to deny them. And someday, when they're grown and successful and thriving, I'll tell them this story about the man who tried to send them away and how his guilt became the foundation of their future. Jacob reached across the table and took her hand. That's the most powerful revenge there is. Success built on someone else's failure. Emily squeezed his fingers. Let's go home. They walked out of Rosewood Cafe together, leaving behind the corner table where so much had happened. Fear and rejection and unexpected kindness, and now an apology that tasted like ash but might, just might, turn into something better. The evening sun was setting over the town, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emily looked up at it and felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, something like hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope she'd carried for 3 years, the hope that kept her going because the alternative was giving up. This was different. This was hope with a foundation, hope with support, hope with a partner standing beside her, and a future that seemed, against all odds, brighter than the past. She leaned into Jacob as they walked to the car, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her close. You know what I realized today? He said quietly. What? That man, Richard. He's going to spend the rest of his life trying to make up for what he almost did. He'll wake up at night thinking about those kids he tried to send away, wondering what would have happened if he'd succeeded. Jacob shook his head. That's a kind of prison. A cage he built himself. Good. Yeah. Jacob opened the car door for her. Good. They drove home through streets that were starting to feel familiar, past buildings that were becoming landmarks in the geography of their shared life. The twins would be with the babysitter for another hour, enough time to process what had happened, to plan what came next. But for now, Emily just wanted to sit in the quiet with Jacob and breathe. They parked outside her apartment building and sat in the car for a moment, neither quite ready to go inside. We should celebrate, Jacob said suddenly. Emily turned to look at him. Celebrate what? Everything. The complaints being withdrawn, the donation, the fact that we survived another battle and came out stronger. He grinned. I'm thinking pizza, the good kind, from that place on Main Street, and ice cream after. Jacob, we can't afford... We can now. He nodded toward her pocket, where the check still sat. Consider it Richard Hamilton buying us dinner. Seems only fair after what he put us through. Emily felt a laugh bubble up in her throat. Genuine, surprised, almost giddy. That's incredibly petty. I know, that's why it's perfect. She leaned across the console and kissed him, hard and fast and full of every emotion she didn't have words for. Pizza sounds amazing, she said when they broke apart. An ice cream? An ice cream. They went inside to get the twins, and the evening unfolded in a blur of pepperoni and laughter and arguments about the best flavor of ice cream, vanilla for Noah, chocolate for Nora, a compromise of strawberry for everyone. By the time they got home, all four of them were sticky and full and happy in a way that felt almost dangerous, like tempting fate by daring to enjoy themselves. But Emily didn't care. Not tonight. Tonight, she had her siblings safe and happy. She had a man who loved her. She had money that would change their future. She had won a battle she'd thought unwinnable. Tonight, she was going to let herself be happy. Tomorrow, the fighting would resume. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new obstacles, new people trying to tell her family they didn't belong. But tonight belonged to them. And that was enough. The check from Richard Hamilton sat in Emily's dresser drawer for 3 weeks before she could bring herself to deposit it. Every night, she would open the drawer and stare at it. That crisp piece of paper with its impossible number, its promise of change, its weight of complicated emotions. Part of her wanted to tear it up, to reject the guilt money from a man who had tried to destroy her family. But another part, the practical part that had kept her and the twins alive for 3 years, knew that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Jacob found her one evening, sitting on the edge of her bed with the check in her hands, tears streaming silently down her face. "Hey." He knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "What's going on?" "I keep thinking about what would have happened if he'd won." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "If they'd taken Noah and Nora away, if I'd had to say goodbye to them, put them on a bus to some school 300 miles away, only see them on holidays." Her hands trembled. "Every time I look at this check, I see all the versions of our story that could have been, all the ways we could have lost each other." Jacob took the check from her shaking fingers and set it aside, then gathered her hands in his. "But that didn't happen. We fought, and we won, and they're still here. They're sleeping in the next room right now, probably dreaming about dinosaurs and ballet. I know that logically, but emotionally..." Emily shook her head. "I can't stop being afraid. Every time things start to feel good, I wait for the other shoe to drop, for someone to show up and try to take it all away again." "That fear might never completely go away," Jacob admitted. 3 years of fighting alone, of being the only thing standing between those kids and disaster, that leaves marks. But you don't have to carry it by yourself anymore. He squeezed her hands. "When the fear comes, you tell me. We face it together. And eventually, maybe, it starts to feel a little less heavy." Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw her own exhaustion reflected back, her own fear, her own desperate hope. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you keep showing up, day after day, for a family that isn't even yours?" Something shifted in Jacob's expression, vulnerable and fierce at the same time. "Because you are mine," he said simply. "All 3 of you. I know we haven't talked about what this is, what we're building, where it's going, but in my heart, Emily, you and Noah and Nora are my family. You're the reason I get up in the morning. You're the reason the future feels like something worth living for instead of just something to survive." Emily's breath caught. "Jacob, I'm not asking for anything," he continued quickly. "I'm not trying to replace anyone or claim some kind of title. I need you to know that this isn't temporary for me. This isn't something I'm doing until it gets hard or inconvenient. This is my life now. You're my life now, and I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment, Emily couldn't speak. The words she wanted to say felt too big, too important, too terrifying. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into that single point of contact. When they finally broke apart, Jacob was smiling. "Does that mean you believe me?" "It means I'm trying to." Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It means I want to believe you more than I've wanted anything in a long time." "That's enough for now." Jacob picked up the check and held it out to her. "And this? This isn't guilt money or blood money or whatever you've been telling yourself. This is ammunition, resources for the war we're fighting. Weapons to build a better future for two kids who deserve everything the world has to offer. Emily took the check, turning it over in her hands. When you put it that way, it sounds almost noble. It is noble. Taking your enemy's resources and using them to strengthen what he tried to destroy? Jacob grinned. That's not accepting charity. That's winning. Despite everything, Emily laughed. Okay, tomorrow. I'll deposit it tomorrow. I'll go with you. You don't have to eat. I want to. Jacob stood, pulling her up with him. Besides, I want to see the bank teller's face when you hand over a $50,000 check. That's going to be entertaining. Emily shook her head, but she was smiling now. You're ridiculous. You love it. Unfortunately, yes, I do. They deposited the check the next morning, and the bank teller's face was, as Jacob had predicted, extremely entertaining. There were forms to fill out and holds to wait through, and a brief, surreal conversation with a manager who seemed convinced there had been some kind of mistake. But by the end of the week, the money was real and accessible, sitting in an account with Noah and Nora's names on it. Emily sat at her kitchen table that Saturday afternoon, laptop open, researching all the things that money could buy. Summer programs for deaf children, ASL tutoring services, technology, tablets with specialized apps, video relay services, devices she'd only ever heard about but could never afford. Every click revealed new possibilities, new doors that had been locked until now. There's a camp, she told Jacob, who was helping Noah with a jigsaw puzzle at the other end of the table. A summer camp for deaf and hard-of-hearing kids. 2 weeks in the mountains with deaf counselors and activities designed for visual communication. They learn archery and swimming and rock climbing, all taught in sign. Sounds amazing. How much? $3,000 for both of them, including transportation. Emily's voice held a note of wonder. 3 months ago, that would have been impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. And now? Now I can give them something I never thought they'd have. She turned the laptop to show him the photos on the camp's website. Smiling children signing to each other around a campfire, deaf teenagers teaching younger kids to swim, counselors with patient hands explaining how to string a bow. Look at them, Jacob. Look at all these kids who are just like Noah and Nora, a whole community of people who understand. Jacob studied the photos, his expression soft. Register them. What? Don't overthink it. Don't talk yourself out of it. Just register them right now before the doubt creeps in. He met her eyes. They deserve this, Emily. You've been fighting for so long just to keep them fed and housed and educated. Let yourself give them something beautiful for once. Emily's cursor hovered over the registration button. 3 years of poverty had trained her to second-guess every expense, to hoard every dollar, to assume that good things would be snatched away the moment she reached for them. The idea of spending $3,000 on something as intangible as joy felt almost irresponsible. But then she looked at Noah, bent over his puzzle with his tongue sticking out in concentration. Looked at Nora, who had abandoned her coloring book to watch the conversation with curious eyes. 2 children who had been through more loss and upheaval in 6 years than most people experienced in a lifetime. 2 children who deserved to know what it felt like to be surrounded by people like them. She clicked the button. There, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Done. How does that feel? Emily considered the question. Terrifying, she admitted, and amazing. And like maybe, just maybe, things are actually going to be okay. Nora appeared at her elbow, signing rapidly. Emily, what are you doing? You look like you're going to cry, but also smile. That's confusing. Emily laughed and pulled her sister onto her lap. I just signed you and Noah up for summer camp, she signed. A special camp for deaf kids. You'll get to swim and do archery and sleep in cabins and meet other children who talk with their hands just like you. Nora's eyes went wide as dinner plates. Really? A camp with other deaf kids? Really? Noah! Nora practically threw herself off Emily's lap to get to her brother. Noah. Noah. Noah! We're going to camp! Noah looked up from his puzzle, confused. Camp? What's camp? It's like school but fun, Nora signed with wild enthusiasm. You sleep there and do activities, and there are other deaf kids, and it's in the mountains, and we're actually going. The twins erupted into a frenzy of excited signing, their hands moving so fast that even Jacob had trouble keeping up. They bounced around the kitchen like pinballs, their joy filling every corner of the small apartment. Emily watched them with tears streaming down her face, and this time she didn't try to hide them. Jacob moved to stand beside her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "You did good, Emily. We did good. We did good." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Emily could remember. With the immediate financial pressure lifted, she was able to cut back to a single job, trading her evening cleaning shifts for more time with the twins. Jacob continued to show up every night, his presence now so routine that Noah and Nora stopped being surprised to see him and started being upset on the rare occasions he couldn't make it. They fell into a rhythm, a family rhythm, though none of them had explicitly named it that. Mornings were rushed chaos, everyone getting ready for their respective days. Afternoons belonged to homework and play and the endless energy of 6-year-olds. Evenings were quieter, shared meals around Emily's small table, conversations that ranged from silly to serious and everything in between. Jacob taught Noah how to throw a football, adapting his instructions to visual demonstration since verbal coaching was useless. He learned Nora's entire repertoire of ballet moves and dutifully applauded each performance, no matter how wobbly. He helped Emily research deaf education programs and long-term planning strategies, turning his lunch breaks into opportunities for phone calls with specialists and advocates. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the wounds began to heal. One evening in late spring, Emily came home from work to find Jacob and the twins in the kitchen, covered in flour and laughing hysterically. "What happened here?" "We're making a cake," Nora signed, her face streaked with white powder. "For you." "A surprise cake," Noah added. "But now it's not a surprise because you're home early." Emily looked at the disaster zone that had once been her kitchen, flour on every surface, eggshells scattered across the counter, something that might have been batter dripping slowly onto the floor, and felt her heart swell to the point of pain. "I love it," she said out loud, then signed it for good measure. "I love it. I love all of you." Jacob, who was somehow even more covered in flour than the children, gave her a sheepish grin. In my defense, the recipe said this was easy. The recipe lied. The recipe absolutely lied. They cleaned up together, all 4 of them, turning the chore into a game that involved far too much giggling and at least one flour fight. By the time the kitchen was restored to something resembling order, the cake was in the oven and Emily's face hurt from smiling. "I could get used to this," she said softly as they waited for the timer, the twins occupied with a card game in the living room. "Get used to what? Flour explosions?" "No." Emily leaned against the counter beside him, their shoulders touching. "This. Coming home to people I love, having help with the hard stuff, not feeling like I'm drowning all the time." Jacob was quiet for a moment. "You know what I keep thinking about?" he said finally. "That night at the cafe. When I first saw Noah and Nora, I almost walked away. Almost told myself it wasn't my business, that someone else would help them. I had my coffee, I'd had a long day, I just wanted to sit down and rest." "What made you go over?" "I don't know, exactly. Something in the way Nora was signing, this desperate, frantic energy that I recognized from watching Sarah in situations where no one could understand her." He shook his head. "It was like my body moved before my brain could stop it, like some part of me knew that those kids needed help and refusing to provide it would be a kind of death." "A kind of death?" "The death of the person Sarah believed I could be." Jacob's voice roughened. "After she died, I spent 3 years just existing, going through the motions. I told myself I was surviving, but really I was just waiting to stop, waiting for some reason to care again." He turned to look at Emily. "You and the twins gave me that reason. You made me feel like maybe Sarah's death didn't have to be the end of everything. Like maybe I could honor her by helping other deaf people the way I couldn't always help her." Emily reached for his hand. "She'd be proud of you. What you've done for Noah and Nora, she'd be so proud." "I hope so." Jacob's fingers tightened around hers. "I hope wherever she is, she can see this. See that her love is still rippling out into the world, still making things better even though she's gone." They stood in comfortable silence, the smell of baking cake filling the apartment, the sounds of the twins' card game drifting in from the other room. Then the timer went off, and the moment broke into cheerful chaos as everyone gathered to inspect the cake. It was lopsided and probably underbaked in the middle, but they ate it anyway, pronouncing it the best cake anyone had ever made in the history of cakes. That night, after the twins were asleep and the apartment was quiet, Jacob pulled Emily out onto the balcony. "I want to talk to you about something," he said, and something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Okay." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the parking lot below, gathering his thoughts. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said finally. "About us. About the twins. About what this is and where it's going." He turned to face her. "And I realize that I've been holding back, protecting myself maybe, or protecting you, waiting for the right moment to say the things I've been feeling." Emily's heart was pounding now. "Jacob, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Emily. I've told you that before, and I meant it every time. But what I haven't said, what I've been afraid to say, is that I want to build a life with you, a real life. Not just showing up for dinner and helping with homework. I want to be here, fully and permanently. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep next to you and face every challenge and celebration as a team. Are you asking me to... I'm asking you to let me be more than a family friend." Jacob's voice was steady, but she could see his hands trembling. "I'm asking you to let me be a partner, a co-parent, whatever title you want to give it. I want to be there for Noah and Nora's first day of second grade. I want to be there when they graduate high school and go to college. I want to be there for all of it, the good and the bad, and everything in between." Emily couldn't breathe. "I know it's fast," Jacob continued. "I know we've only known each other a few months, and I'm not asking for anything official right now. No rings, no ceremonies, no pressure. I just need you to know that this is where my heart is. With you. With them. And if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve to be here." The world seemed to spin around Emily, too big and too beautiful to comprehend. "Yes," she whispered. Jacob blinked. "Yes?" "Yes. To all of it. To everything." She was crying now, but the tears felt different, lighter, cleaner, full of hope instead of fear. "I've been afraid to want this, afraid to believe it could be real, but you keep showing up every single day, and I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I want to just live with you, as a family." Jacob's face transformed, years of grief and loneliness falling away to reveal something radiant beneath. "You mean that?" "I mean it." He kissed her then, under the stars on her tiny balcony, and Emily felt something click into place, some final piece of a puzzle she hadn't even known she was solving. They stayed outside for hours, talking about the future in ways they never had before. Where they might live, how they would handle the legal complexities of Jacob becoming a more permanent presence in the twins' lives. What they wanted to teach Noah and Nora about love and family, and the strange, winding paths that sometimes led people to each other. By the time they finally went inside, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Emily fell asleep in Jacob's arms, exhausted and hopeful, and for the first time in years, truly at peace. The summer camp exceeded every expectation. Emily and Jacob drove the twins up to the mountains on a bright July morning, the car packed with sleeping bags and sunscreen and more excitement than the small vehicle could reasonably contain. Noah and Nora had been vibrating with anticipation for weeks, counting down the days on a calendar Nora had decorated with stickers of suns and pine trees. The camp itself was nestled in a valley surrounded by towering evergreens, its wooden cabins weathered but welcoming. Deaf counselors greeted them at the entrance, their hands moving in fluid practiced ASL as they introduced themselves and explained the schedule. Noah and Nora stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed. "Everyone here signs," Noah said, his hands moving slowly with wonder. "Everyone." "That's right," one of the counselors signed back with a warm smile. "This is a place where nobody has to explain how they communicate, where nobody has to feel different. You're going to fit right in." Nora burst into tears. Emily knelt beside her immediately, alarmed. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? If you don't want to stay, we can—" "No." Nora signed fiercely through her tears. I want to stay. I want to stay so much. I'm crying because I'm happy, because I've never been somewhere where everyone talks like me. It's like, she struggled for the words. It's like finding out there's a whole world of people like us, and they've been here the whole time. Emily pulled her sister into a crushing hug, her own tears falling freely. I know, baby. I know. They spent an hour touring the facilities, meeting counselors, watching as Noah and Nora began to relax into this new environment. By the time Emily and Jacob had to leave, the twins were already playing with a group of other children, their hands flying in animated conversation, their faces bright with a joy Emily had never seen before. We'll be back in 2 weeks, she signed to them at the goodbye. Have the best time, learn everything, make friends. We will. Both twins signed back, then launched themselves at Emily for one final group hug. Jacob knelt down to their level. I'm so proud of you both, he signed. You're going to have an amazing adventure. And when you come back, I want to hear every single story. We'll remember everything, Noah promised. Everything, Nora echoed with emphasis. Jacob hugged them both, and Emily saw him blink rapidly as he stood. The drive home was quiet, both adults lost in their own thoughts. Halfway down the mountain, Emily reached over and took Jacob's hand. They're going to be okay, she said. I know. His voice was thick. It's just seeing them there, with all those other deaf kids, finally having a community that understands them. He shook his head. I kept thinking about Sarah. How much she would have loved to see this. How much she would have loved them. She does see it. Somehow, somewhere, she sees it. You really believe that? Emily considered the question. I believe that love doesn't just disappear when someone dies. I believe it echoes, ripples out, keeps touching the world in ways we can't always see. She squeezed his hand. Your love for Sarah is part of why you're here, why you care so much about Noah and Nora. That's not a coincidence. That's her legacy, still unfolding. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, he said finally, for saying that, for understanding. Always. The 2 weeks while the twins were at camp were strange and unfamiliar. For the first time in 3 years, Emily didn't have to structure her entire life around their needs. She didn't have to rush home from work or arrange childcare or make sure there was enough food in the refrigerator. She could just exist. It was disorienting. Jacob moved in temporarily during that period, filling the apartment with his presence in ways that felt both new and completely natural. They cooked dinner together without interruption. They watched movies without having to pause for bathroom breaks. They stayed up late talking about everything and nothing, learning the small details of each other that had been crowded out by the constant demands of parenting. I didn't know you played guitar, Emily said one evening, watching him pull a battered acoustic from his truck. I don't really. Sarah taught me a few chords before. He stopped, cleared his throat. I haven't touched it since she died, but I was thinking maybe it's time. He played for her that night, simple songs, fumbling fingers, half-remembered melodies. His voice was rough and untrained, but there was something beautiful in the way he gave himself over to the music, eyes closed, face peaceful. Emily listened and fell a little more in love. Will you teach Noah and Nora? She asked when he finished. They can't hear it, but they can feel the vibrations, and they'd love learning to make music. Jacob looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, I'd like that. The days passed. Emily and Jacob settled into their new normal, testing the shape of a life they were building together. They talked about the future, really talked, making plans and contingencies, discussing how to blend their lives in ways that would work for everyone. And then, suddenly, it was time to pick up the twins. They made the drive back up the mountain on a sunny afternoon, both of them barely able to contain their anticipation. The camp parking lot was full of families reuniting, children running into parents' arms, counselors waving goodbye. Emily spotted Noah and Nora before they spotted her. Two small figures standing near the main cabin, surrounded by a group of children who were clearly their new best friends. Both twins were tan and healthy looking, their hair wild from 2 weeks of outdoor living, their faces animated with conversation. Then Nora saw Emily and screamed, a sound that carried across the entire parking lot, pure and joyful and utterly unselfconscious. Emily, friend? Jacob, you're here! The twins sprinted across the grass and launched themselves at the adults with enough force to nearly knock everyone over. There were tears and laughter and hands moving too fast to follow, everyone trying to talk at once. It was amazing, Nora signed when she finally calmed down enough to communicate clearly. I learned to shoot arrows and swim in a lake, and there was a campfire every night, and everyone signed, and I made 5 new friends, and one of them is named Lily, and she's deaf too, and she lives only 2 hours away, and we're going to visit each other, and... I touched a snake, Noah interrupted, his face glowing with pride. A real snake. The counselor let us hold it, and I wasn't even scared. Well, maybe a little scared, but I still did it. The ride home was chaos. Wonderful, beautiful chaos. The twins talked over each other constantly, their stories overlapping and intertwining, 2 weeks of experiences pouring out in an endless stream. Emily and Jacob listened with full attention, asking questions, exclaiming at the right moments, drinking in every detail. By the time they got home, all 4 of them were exhausted. But that night, as Emily tucked Noah and Nora into bed, something felt different. "Emily?" Noah signed, his eyes heavy with sleep. "Yes, buddy?" "Thank you for sending us to camp, for giving us people like us." Emily's heart clenched. "You're welcome, sweetheart. You deserve to have people who understand you. Can we go back next year?" "Absolutely, every year if you want." Noah smiled, that rare, brilliant smile that transformed his whole face. "I love you, Emily. I love you too, Noah. More than anything." She kissed his forehead and moved to Nora's bed. "Emily?" Nora signed, her eyes already closing. "Yes, princess? Is friend Jacob going to stay with us forever?" The question caught Emily off guard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because he makes you happy, and he makes us happy, and I don't want him to go away like Daddy did." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "Jacob isn't going anywhere," she signed carefully. "He loves us very much, and he's going to be part of our family for a long, long time." "Promise?" "I promise." Nora nodded, satisfied, and let her eyes close. Emily sat between their beds for a long moment, watching them drift into sleep. These 2 small humans who had been through so much and still managed to trust, to hope, to love. Then she went out to the living room, where Jacob was waiting. "They're asleep," she said. "Everything okay?" "More than okay." Emily crossed to him and settled into his arms on the couch. "Nora asked if you were going to stay with us forever." Jacob went very still. "What did you tell her?" "I told her yes." Silence stretched between them, heavy with significance. "Emily, I know what I said. I know what it means." She pulled back to look at him. "And I meant it. Every word. You're part of this family now, Jacob. Officially, permanently, completely. Whatever that looks like legally or logistically, we'll figure it out. But in here," she pressed her hand to her heart. "In here, it's already true." Jacob's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I never thought I'd have this again," he said, his voice rough. "After Sarah, I never thought I'd have a family again." "Well, you do. A messy, complicated, wonderful family who needs you." Emily smiled through her own tears. "So what do you say? Ready to make this official?" "I've been ready since the moment I walked into that cafe." They kissed, sealing something that had been building for months. A promise, a commitment, a beginning. Outside, the summer night was warm and full of stars. Inside, 2 children slept peacefully in their beds, dreaming of camps and friends, and a future that finally felt safe. And on the couch in the living room, 2 people who had found each other against all odds held on tight and refused to let go. This was family now. This was home. The months that followed moved like water finding its natural course, each day flowing into the next with a rhythm that felt increasingly inevitable. Jacob gave up his sparse apartment at the end of September, packing 3 years of lonely existence into boxes that seemed too small to contain so much grief. Emily helped him move, the twins bouncing around the nearly empty rooms with curiosity about this place where friend Jacob had lived before he was theirs. "It's so quiet here," Nora signed, her nose wrinkling, "and it smells like old socks." "It does not smell like old socks," Jacob signed back, though he was grinning. "It smells like bachelor." "What's bachelor?" Someone who lives alone and doesn't have anyone to tell him his apartment smells weird. That's sad, Noah signed seriously. I'm glad you live with us now. Our apartment smells like Emily's cooking. Is that better than old socks? Much better. They loaded the truck with Jacob's meager possessions. A few pieces of furniture, some books, his guitar, and one box he carried himself, handling it with such careful reverence that Emily didn't ask what was inside. She found out later that night, after the twins were asleep and they were unpacking boxes in what was now their shared bedroom. This was Sarah's, Jacob said quietly, lifting out a worn quilt in shades of blue and silver. Her grandmother made it when she was born. She slept under it every night of her life, right up until he stopped, cleared his throat. I couldn't get rid of it, couldn't even look at it for the first year, but I couldn't let it go either. Emily reached out and touched the fabric, feeling the weight of love stitched into every square. It's beautiful. I thought maybe we could put it on our bed, if that's not too weird. Having my dead wife's blanket, it's not weird. Emily took the quilt from his hands and spread it across their bed, smoothing out the wrinkles with gentle fingers. She's part of you, Jacob, part of our story. I don't want you to hide her away or pretend she didn't exist. Jacob stared at the quilt, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Sometimes I feel guilty, he admitted. Being this happy when she's not here, moving forward when she can't. Do you think that's what she'd want? For you to stay stuck in grief forever? No. A faint smile crossed his face. She'd probably yell at me, tell me I was being dramatic and wasting time I could spend helping people. The smile widened. She was very practical about death, said it was just part of life and people made too big a deal about it. She sounds amazing. She was. She really was. Jacob sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand over the quilt. But you know what? I think she'd love you, and I think she'd absolutely adore Noah and Nora. Yeah? Yeah. She always wanted kids. We tried for years, but he shook his head. It just wasn't in the cards for us. She would have been such a good mother. Emily sat beside him, leaning her head against his shoulder. Maybe that's why you found us, she said softly. Maybe somewhere, somehow, she helped guide you to that cafe, gave you the family she always wanted you to have. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. I like that idea, he said finally. I like thinking she's still looking out for me. She is, I'm sure of it. They sat together in the gathering darkness, Sarah's quilt spread beneath them, building a future on the foundation of a past that would never be forgotten. Winter came early that year, bringing cold winds and the first whispers of snow. The twins celebrated their 7th birthday in November, a celebration that had to be held indoors due to the weather, but was no less joyful for it. Emily baked a cake, successfully this time, without any flour explosions. And Jacob constructed an elaborate treasure hunt that sent Noah and Nora racing through the apartment, following signed clues to hidden presents. Their friends from school came, including Sophie, the hearing girl who had first asked Nora to play at recess. Over the past months, Sophie had become practically fluent in sign language, and she served as an informal bridge between the deaf twins and their hearing classmates. The party was chaos, kids everywhere, signing and speaking and laughing, nobody seeming to notice or care about the difference between those who could hear and those who couldn't. Look at them, Emily murmured to Jacob as they watched from the kitchen doorway. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this. Couldn't have imagined them having real friends, having a community, being just kids. You made this happen. We made this happen. I couldn't have done it alone. You were doing it alone before I showed up. You were keeping them alive, keeping them safe, fighting for them every single day. Surviving, Emily said. I was surviving. She gestured at the chaos of happy children. This is living. There's a difference. Jacob pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. There really is. The party wound down as afternoon faded to evening. Parents arrived to collect their children, many of them pausing to sign basic greetings to Noah and Nora, a development that made Emily's heart swell every time. The deaf community they'd worked so hard to build was expanding, rippling outward in ways she'd never anticipated. When the last guest had left and the apartment was quiet again, Noah and Nora sat surrounded by torn wrapping paper and new toys. their faces flushed with happiness. Best birthday ever, Nora signed definitively. Better than last year, Noah agreed. Last year we didn't have a party. Why not? Jacob asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. The twins exchanged glances, communicating in that silent way siblings sometimes did. Emily was tired, Noah signed carefully. She worked a lot, and she was sad. I wasn't sad, Emily signed quickly, but Nora was already shaking her head. You were sad, Emily. We could tell. You tried to hide it, but your eyes were sad even when you smiled. The little girl's expression was far too knowing for a 7-year-old. Are you still sad? Emily felt tears prick her eyes. No, sweetheart. I'm not sad anymore. Because of friend Jacob? Because of a lot of things. Because of friend Jacob, yes. But also because you and Noah are doing so well. Because we have help now. Because, she struggled for the words. Because I finally feel like we're going to be okay. We are okay, Noah signed firmly. We have you and friend Jacob and Maria at school and Sophie and camp friends and a whole big family now. That's right, Jacob signed. A whole big family. Friend Jacob? Nora's hands moved hesitantly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you going to marry Emily? The question hung in the air, innocent and enormous. Jacob looked at Emily, something unspoken passing between them. Would you want me to? He asked Nora. Yes, both twins signed simultaneously, with such emphasis that their hands seemed to shout. Then you'd be our real family, forever and ever. Jacob's throat worked. I'd like that, he signed. I'd like that very much. So do it. Noah's hands were practically dancing. Ask her. Ask her now. Maybe this isn't the right moment. It's the perfect moment, Nora insisted. It's our birthday. Nothing bad can happen on our birthday. Emily found herself laughing through tears. I think you're being tag-teamed, she told Jacob. I think you're right. He took a deep breath, then turned to face her fully. I was going to wait. I had this whole plan, dinner at a nice restaurant, flowers, a speech I'd been practicing for weeks. Jacob, but you know what? They're right. This is the perfect moment. Not because it's their birthday, but because this is our family. This apartment, this mess of wrapping paper, these two incredible kids, this is what I want. This is what I want forever. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box that Emily hadn't noticed him carrying. I've had this for a month, he admitted. Sarah's wedding ring. Her grandmother gave it to her, and she always said that if anything ever happened to her, she wanted it to go to someone who would love me as much as she did. His voice cracked. I know, she'd want you to have it. Emily couldn't breathe. Jacob opened the box, revealing a simple silver band set with a single small diamond. It was delicate and beautiful and clearly old, carrying the weight of generations of love. Emily Hart, Jacob said, his voice steady despite the tears tracking down his cheeks. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and a father to Noah and Nora, and a partner in this wild, beautiful life we're building together? Say yes, Nora signed frantically. Emily. Say yes. Say yes, say yes, say yes, Noah signed, bouncing on his knees. Emily looked at the ring, at Jacob's hopeful, terrified face, at the twins vibrating with anticipation, at the apartment that had transformed from a place of survival into a home filled with love. Yes, she whispered, and then louder. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Jacob slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. The twins erupted into cheers, throwing themselves at Emily and Jacob in a tangle of arms and happy tears. For several minutes, nobody could communicate anything coherent. There was too much hugging, too much laughing, too much joy to be contained in words or signs. When they finally untangled themselves, Nora looked at Emily with shining eyes. Now, friend Jacob will be our dad, she signed, our real dad. If that's okay with you, Jacob signed back. It's more than okay, Noah signed. It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm not perfect, Jacob signed. I make mistakes and I'm stubborn and I can't cook to save my life. You're perfect for us, Nora clarified. That's what matters. Jacob pulled both children into his arms, holding them tight. I love you, he said out loud, then signed it for emphasis. Both of you. So much. We love you too, Dad, Noah signed. Dad! The word, the sign, hit Jacob like a physical force. He looked at Emily, eyes wide. He called me Dad. He did. I'm going to be their dad. You already are, Emily signed. The paperwork is just a formality. That night, long after the twins had crashed from their birthday excitement, Emily and Jacob sat on the couch with Sarah's quilt wrapped around their shoulders. Are you sure about this? Emily asked. Using her ring, I mean, is it really okay? It's more than okay, it's right. Jacob twisted the silver band on her finger gently. Sarah would have loved this. Loved knowing her ring would be part of a new family, would keep being passed down through generations. She was big on continuity, on things lasting beyond individual lifetimes. Tell me about her. Really tell me. I want to know everything. So Jacob talked. For hours he talked. About how they'd met, how she'd taught him to sign, how she'd fought for accessibility everywhere she went. He told Emily about their wedding, small and intimate, conducted entirely in sign language. About the trips they'd taken, the dreams they'd shared, the life they'd built together. About the night she died, the phone call from the hospital, the way his world had shattered into pieces he'd thought could never be reassembled. And then I walked into that cafe, he finished, his voice hoarse from talking. And I saw two little kids who reminded me so much of her, not in how they looked, but in how the world was treating them, ignoring them, acting like they didn't matter. He shook his head. I couldn't walk away. Something in me wouldn't let me. That something was love, Emily said softly. Love that Sarah built in you, love that she left behind. You think so? I know so. Emily curled closer to him under the quilt. She's part of us now, Jacob, part of our family story. And I'm grateful to her, grateful she loved you so well, grateful she taught you the language that lets you connect with Noah and Nora, grateful she made you into the person who would one day save us. Jacob was quiet for a long time. Thank you, he said finally. For what? For accepting her, for making space for her memory in our life together. Some people would be jealous or uncomfortable or want me to just move on. I don't want you to move on. I want you to move forward. Emily took his hand. There's a difference. Moving on means leaving the past behind. Moving forward means carrying it with you while still making room for new things. New love, new family, new chapters. I like that, Jacob murmured. Moving forward together. Together. They fell asleep on the couch that night, wrapped in Sarah's quilt, dreaming of futures that finally felt possible. The wedding was held in spring in a small garden venue that Emily and Jacob chose specifically because it could accommodate both signing and speaking guests. They kept it intimate, close friends, a few colleagues, the families they'd built rather than been born into. Maria came, of course, serving as interpreter for any hearing guests who didn't sign. Sophie's family came, her parents having become close friends with Emily over the months of playdates and school events. Even Richard Hamilton sent a card, along with a generous gift for Noah and Nora's education fund, which Emily accepted with only a small amount of grumbling. The twins were the ring bearers, walking down the aisle together with matching outfits and barely contained excitement. Noah carried the rings on a pillow he'd decorated himself, covered in dinosaur stickers because he'd insisted that dinosaurs make everything better. Nora scattered flower petals from a basket she'd helped Emily pick out, pirouetting her way down the aisle like the ballerina she still dreamed of becoming. The ceremony was bilingual, spoken and signed simultaneously, with pauses built in to allow everyone to follow along. The officiant, a deaf woman who had been one of Sarah's closest friends, conducted the entire proceeding in ASL while an interpreter voiced for the hearing guests. When it came time for the vows, Jacob turned to face Emily with tears already streaming down his face. I didn't think I'd ever stand here again, he signed, speaking the words aloud at the same time. Didn't think I'd ever open my heart to another person after losing Sarah. But you and Noah and Nora proved me wrong. You showed me that love doesn't run out, that the heart has room for grief and joy, for memory and hope, for the family we've lost and the family we've found. He took Emily's hands in his. I promise to love you through easy days and hard ones. I promise to fight beside you for the things that matter, for accessibility, for equality, for Noah and Nora's right to thrive. I promise to be patient when you're scared and honest when you need truth. I promise to keep showing up every single day for as long as I live." Emily's voice was thick with tears as she signed her response. "For 3 years, I thought I was alone. I thought I had to carry everything, every burden, every fear, every responsibility by myself. You walked into a cafe and proved me wrong. You saw 2 children the world was ignoring, and you chose to see them. You learned their language and fought their battles and loved them as fiercely as I do." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to let you in, to share my burdens instead of hiding them, to trust you with my fears and my hopes and my dreams. I promise to be your partner in everything, raising Noah and Nora, building a life together, facing whatever challenges come our way. I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as the stars keep shining." The officiant smiled and signed, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss." Jacob kissed Emily as the guests erupted into applause, and from the deaf guests, the distinctive gesture of waving hands that signified celebration in ASL. Noah and Nora rushed forward to join the embrace, turning the kiss into a family hug that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. Afterward, there was dancing and food, and more joy than Emily had felt in one place in her entire life. She watched Jacob spin Nora around the dance floor, both of them laughing at their complete lack of rhythm. She watched Noah shyly ask Sophie to dance, the 2 children moving through basic steps while Sophie's mother signed instructions from the sideline. She watched Maria teaching a group of hearing guests common ASL phrases, all of them fumbling adorably. And she thought about how far they'd come. A year ago, she'd been drowning, working herself to exhaustion, fighting losing battles, watching her siblings be ignored and dismissed by a world that couldn't be bothered to learn their language. She'd been surviving, not living, holding on by her fingernails, waiting for the next disaster to strike. Now she had a husband, a family, a community that was growing every day. Resources to give Noah and Nora opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. A future that stretched out before them, bright with possibility. It hadn't been easy. Nothing about their journey had been easy, but somehow, impossibly, beautifully, they'd made it. Later that night, after the reception ended and the guests went home, the 4 of them walked along the garden path in the soft evening light. Jacob carried a sleepy Nora on his hip. Emily held Noah's hand. Fireflies blinked in the gathering dusk, tiny lights scattered across the darkness. "Mom?" Emily's heart stopped. She looked down at Noah, who was watching her with an expression of nervous hope. "Can I call you Mom now?" he signed. "Since Jacob is our dad?" Emily knelt down to his level, her wedding dress pooling on the ground. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," she signed carefully. "I've always thought of myself as your sister, but if you want to call me Mom..." "You're the only mom we remember," Noah signed. "Our other mom, our first mom, we were too little when she died. You're the one who takes care of us. You're the one who loves us. You're..." He struggled for the sign, then found it. "You're our mom, our real mom. And I want to call you that." Emily pulled him into a hug so tight she worried she might crush him. "Okay," she whispered into his hair. "Okay, you can call me Mom." "Me too?" Nora signed from Jacob's arms, suddenly wide awake. "You too, Princess. You too." They walked back to the car as a family, Mom, Dad, and 2 children who had finally found their place in the world. The stars were coming out overhead, scattered across the sky like promises. As Emily buckled Noah into his car seat, he looked up at her with those serious brown eyes. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad friend Jacob found us that night." "Me too, buddy. Me too." "Do you think our first mom sent him? Like, from heaven or wherever she is?" Emily paused, considering the question. "I think," she signed slowly, "that love has ways of finding us when we need it most. Maybe your first mom helped. Maybe Jacob's wife Sarah helped. Maybe the universe just knew we all needed each other." She smiled. "Does it matter how it happened?" Noah thought about this. "No," he decided. "What matters is that we're a family now. That's right. What matters is that we're a family. Forever, forever and ever." Noah smiled, that rare, brilliant smile that transformed his whole face. and settled back into his seat. Emily closed the door and turned to find Jacob watching her, his expression soft with love. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Emily looked at her husband, at the sleeping Nora in his arms, at Noah waiting patiently in the car. She thought about the apartment waiting for them, cramped and imperfect, but filled with love. She thought about the future stretching out ahead, uncertain but no longer frightening. "Yeah," she said, "I'm ready." They drove home through streets that had become familiar, past buildings that had become landmarks in the geography of their shared life. The twins fell asleep before they were halfway there, exhausted from the emotions of the day. Jacob carried Nora inside while Emily guided a stumbling Noah to his bed. They tucked both children in together. The twins had never stopped sharing a room, finding comfort in each other's presence, even now that they had options for more space. "I love you," Emily signed to each of them in turn, pressing kisses to their foreheads. "Love you too, Mom," Nora murmured sleepily. "Love you, Mom," Noah echoed. "Mom." The word still sent shivers down Emily's spine. She and Jacob retreated to their own room, collapsing onto the bed with matching sighs of exhaustion. "We did it," Emily said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "Did what?" "Everything. Built a family, got married, gave those kids a life." She turned to look at him. "When I met you, I was barely holding on. I was so tired, Jacob, so scared. I thought it was just going to be me and the twins against the world forever, fighting every day just to survive. And now? Now I have you. I have a partner. I have someone who fights beside me instead of making me fight alone." She took his hand. "You saved us, you know. That night in the cafe. You saved all three of us." "You saved me too," Jacob said quietly. "I was dying, Emily. Not physically, but inside. I'd given up on everything except getting through each day. I'd stopped believing in futures, in possibilities, in love." He brought her hand to his lips. "And then I walked into that cafe and saw two little kids signing for help, and something woke up inside me, something that had been dead for 3 years. Sarah, maybe, or maybe just hope. The belief that things could still be good, that love could still exist, that life could still mean something." He pulled her close. "You and the twins gave me a reason to live again. That's not a small thing." "No," Emily agreed. "It's not." They lay together in the darkness, Sarah's quilt spread over them, listening to the nighttime sounds of the city and the soft breathing of sleeping children in the next room. "Jacob?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for everything. For the cafe and the IEP meeting and the fights and the love and all of it, every single moment. Thank you for letting me in. I know it wasn't easy. I know trust doesn't come naturally to you, not after everything you've been through. It's getting easier." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Every day. A little easier." Jacob pressed a kiss to her hair. "That's all we can ask for, I think. A little easier each day. A little more trust. A little more hope." He yawned. "And maybe a little more sleep. I'm exhausted." Emily laughed softly. "Me too. Good night, husband." "Good night, wife." They drifted off wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built. Photos on the walls, toys in the corners, the faint smell of Noah's dinosaur stickers and Nora's glittercraft projects. A family born from the quiet. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were still battles to fight, for better services, for greater accessibility, for Noah and Nora's right to thrive in a world that still didn't fully understand or accommodate deaf people. There were setbacks and disappointments, and nights when Emily cried from frustration and exhaustion. But she never cried alone. Jacob was always there, steady, patient, fierce when fierceness was needed. They faced every obstacle together, drawing strength from each other and from the children who grew stronger and more confident with each passing year. Noah discovered his passion for science, his childhood dream of paleontology evolving into a fascination with biology and the natural world. His teachers noted his exceptional intelligence and work ethic, predicting great things for his future. By the time he reached middle school, he was already talking about college, about becoming a researcher, about making discoveries that would change the world. Nora pursued ballet with single-minded determination. She couldn't hear the music, but she could feel it, the vibrations through the floor, the rhythm in her bones. Her teachers learned to sign, and her dance evolved into something unique and beautiful, a form of expression that transcended sound. By high school, she was winning competitions, her performances drawing audiences who marveled at the deaf girl who danced as if the music lived inside her. Both children maintained their connection to the deaf community, attending summer camps every year, building friendships that would last a lifetime. They grew up proud of who they were, never ashamed of their deafness, never feeling less than anyone else. "You did this," Jacob said to Emily one evening, watching the twins, now teenagers, through the kitchen window as they signed rapidly to each other in the backyard. "You gave them the foundation, the security, the belief that they deserve everything the world has to offer." "We did this," Emily corrected. "I couldn't have done it alone. You were doing it before I showed up. I was surviving before you showed up. This—" She gestured at the house they'd bought 2 years ago, at the garden they'd planted together, at the family photos covering every wall. "This is living. This is what we built together." Jacob wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Best decision I ever made," he murmured. "Walking into that cafe, best decision I ever made, saying yes when you offered to help." "You almost didn't. I almost didn't." Emily leaned back into his embrace. "I was so scared, so sure you'd turn out to be like everyone else, full of promises you couldn't keep, ready to disappear the moment things got hard. I hope I've proven otherwise by now." "You've proven it every single day for 10 years. She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Jacob Miles." "I love you too, Emily Miles." In the backyard, Noah noticed his parents watching and waved enthusiastically. "What are you two doing?" he signed through the window. "Being mushy again?" "We're allowed to be mushy," Emily signed back. "We're married." "Gross," both teens signed in unison, but they were grinning. "Come inside," Jacob signed. "Dinner's almost ready." "What are we having?" "Lasagna." "Dad's lasagna." Nora's hands moved excitedly. "The good kind?" "The good kind," Jacob confirmed. Both children abandoned their conversation and raced for the door, suddenly starving. Dinner was loud and chaotic, hands flying as 4 people tried to talk at once. Noah described his latest science project. Nora demonstrated a new dance move she'd learned. Emily reminded everyone about the schedule for the week. Jacob arbitrated disputes about who got the last piece of garlic bread. It was ordinary, messy, completely unremarkable, and it was everything Emily had ever wanted. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the twins had retreated to their rooms for homework, Emily found herself standing on the back porch, staring up at the stars. Jacob joined her a moment later, wrapping Sarah's quilt around both their shoulders. They'd kept it all these years, using it as a blanket for stargazing and difficult conversations and moments that needed extra comfort. "Penny for your thoughts," Jacob said. "I was thinking about that night, the cafe, how close we came to missing each other." "What do you mean?" "You said you almost walked away, almost told yourself it wasn't your business." Emily shook her head. If you'd just gotten your coffee and found a seat and ignored those 2 scared kids in the corner, everything would be different. I might never have gotten the services the twins needed, might never have found a community for them, might never have found you. But I didn't walk away." "No, you didn't." She turned to look at him. "Why not? Really? What made you go over to them?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "I think," he said finally, "it was because of what I saw in Nora's hands. She was signing help, this frantic, desperate gesture that I recognized from watching Sarah in situations where no one could understand her. And I thought, if Sarah were here, she would never forgive me for walking past a child asking for help in her language. She would never let me pretend I hadn't seen." He paused. "So I didn't pretend. I saw and I acted, and here we are." "Here we are," Emily echoed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had walked away?" "Sometimes. But then I remember that you didn't, and that's what matters." She leaned into him. "We can't live in hypotheticals, Jacob. We can only live in what is. And what is pretty wonderful. It really is." They stood together under the stars, wrapped in Sarah's quilt, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built. The house, the garden, the sounds of teenage children doing homework inside. Jacob? Yeah? Thank you for seeing us, for not walking away, for choosing us every day for all these years. Thank you for letting me choose you. I know it wasn't easy in the beginning. Nothing worth having is easy. No, Jacob agreed. It isn't. Inside, Nora appeared at the window, signing frantically. Mom, Dad! Noah's being annoying. I am not, Noah signed from somewhere behind her. She started it. Emily sighed, but she was smiling. Some things never change. Would you want them to? She thought about it. The chaos, the noise, the constant negotiation of life with teenagers. The exhaustion and the frustration and the never-ending demands on her time and energy. No, she decided. Not for anything. Jacob kissed her forehead. Then let's go, referee. They went inside together, leaving the stars to wheel overhead, leaving Sarah's quilt folded on the porch chair for next time. The argument between the twins turned out to be about borrowed headphones, easily resolved with a few firm words and a reminder about sharing. Normalcy. Beautiful, chaotic, precious normalcy. Later that night, after the house was quiet and the children were asleep, Emily lay in bed watching Jacob breathe beside her. His face was relaxed in sleep, the lines of worry and grief that had marked him when they first met softened by years of love and purpose. She thought about all the paths their lives could have taken, all the ways things could have gone wrong, all the moments that had aligned one after another to bring them to this place. A single father walking into a cafe after a long day, two deaf children signing desperately for help, a young woman drowning under the weight of responsibilities she'd never asked for, three broken hearts finding each other in the quiet. Emily reached out and touched Jacob's face gently, tracing the lines she'd memorized over a decade of marriage. Thank you, she whispered to the darkness, to Jacob, to Sarah, wherever she might be, to the universe that had brought them together. Thank you for this life. Jacob stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Emily? Everything okay? Everything's perfect. She kissed him softly. Go back to sleep. He smiled, already drifting off again. Love you. Love you too. Emily settled back against her pillow, Jacob's arm automatically wrapping around her waist. From down the hall, she could hear the faint sounds of Noah's white noise machine and Nora's fan, the little comforts they'd kept from childhood. Her family. Her beautiful, improbable, hard-won family. 10 years ago, she'd been a 19-year-old girl with nothing but determination and love, trying to raise two deaf toddlers in a world that didn't want to understand them. She'd been exhausted, terrified, convinced she was failing. Now she was a mother, a wife, a woman who had fought 1,000 battles and emerged stronger from each one. She had a partner who stood beside her, children who were thriving, a life that was full and rich and meaningful. It hadn't been easy. Nothing about their journey had been easy. But lying there in the darkness, surrounded by the sounds of the life they'd built, Emily wouldn't have changed a single moment. Because sometimes the hardest roads led to the most beautiful destinations. And sometimes a single father and two deaf twins and an exhausted young woman could become something none of them had dared to dream. A family. A real family. Born from kindness, built from struggle, sustained by love. In the quiet of the night, under a quilt made by Sarah's grandmother decades ago, Emily closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victories, new moments of joy and frustration and everything in between. But tonight, she was at peace. Tonight, she was home. And that was more than enough.